After getting hit by Truck-kun, a boy wonders why all the people who die in the Sanzu River dress in white and have to walk as a group. He remembers what his senior once said, where they wondered if there is life after death. Looking at the person in front of him made Hikaru realize and accept that he has already passed away. Never expecting to die so young, Hikaru then moved away from the line as he preferred to keep distance from the others. Hearing some commotion in front of him, Hikaru did not expect that there would still be bullying after death. Never having been in a fight before, the thought of being dead gave Hikaru the courage to fight against the bullies. After kicking the bald man away, Hikaru then continued with his punishment and stomped on the bald man's groin. Seeing their leader being easily defeated, two dead hoodlums then dragged their leader away. Hikaru then lent the man who was being bullied a hand before introducing himself. When the man learned that he was rescued by a 15-year-old, he felt embarrassed as he was rescued by someone who was way younger than him. Returning the favor, the man handed Hikaru a bag. The man informed Hikaru that he also had a bag with him in case Hikaru did not know about it. The man then left after telling Hikaru that he does not mind if Hikaru takes his bag. A man suddenly told Hikaru that he is a very kind person and then asked Hikaru to listen to him for a moment. Hikaru wondered if the man was a foreigner, and Hikaru also noticed how the man dressed differently from them. As the man did not have much time, he asked Hikaru to go to his world and live in his house. Confused, Hikaru asked the man for more details about what he was asking. Showing a wound, the man told Hikaru that he was going to die soon. Hikaru, who had gotten more confused, thought that he was currently in the afterlife and believed that he and the man should already be dead and not dying. The man revealed that he was from another world and that he used the crossing the world ability he discovered. The limit of the ability landed the man in the afterlife. With Hikaru still confused by what the man was saying, the man told Hikaru how he wanted to explain in more detail, but no longer had the time for it. The man then pleaded with Hikaru to go to his world and make his wish come true. If Hikaru agreed to the man's wish, the man promised Hikaru that he could come back to life. Being told that he could live his life as he liked as long as Hikaru fulfilled the request, Hikaru doubted the man's words. Hikaru then asked the man what the price would be if he accepted the request. The man told Hikaru that he could explain further if Hikaru chose to come back to life. With no time left, the man reassured Hikaru that nothing bad would happen to him. Sighing, Hikaru then told the man that he would accept the favor and would listen more to what he had to say. Thrilled by Hikaru's decision, the man then performed his technique. The man introduced himself as Roland Nui Zarek and told Hikaru that he would be giving his body to him. When Hikaru finally woke up, he immediately stood up and walked toward a mirror. Seeing his reflection, Hikaru could not believe that he had actually come back to life. After feeling discomfort in his head, Hikaru realized that he had absorbed all of Roland's memories. Realizing he has now become Roland, Hikaru became furious, feeling he had been tricked by Roland, who was standing right behind him. Roland's expression turned cold when Hikaru asked him why he needed Hikaru to kill a person. Roland admitted to Hikaru that he did indeed want him to kill a person. He explained that Count Morx was a key figure in a corrupt aristocracy. Roland had tried to rectify Count Morx's wrongdoings but ended up having his parents killed by Count Morx. Roland managed to defeat the Count using the skill Soul-Sucking Stone, but in return, most of his own soul was sucked out. In an hour or so, Roland would completely vanish. Hikaru was shocked when Roland informed him that if Hikaru did not kill the Count within the next hour, Roland's body would reject Hikaru's soul. After hearing Roland's reason, Hikaru was left with no other choice than to follow Roland's orders, or his soul would vanish into nothingness. Picking up a dagger, Hikaru agreed to help Roland in exchange for his life. Since they were going to kill someone, Hikaru believed that they should also be prepared for what was coming. Roland then gave Hikaru a present and asked him to sharpen his senses. Closing his eyes, Hikaru was surprised when a window suddenly appeared in front of him. After informing Hikaru that the window in front of him represented his power, Roland then left as he was running low on energy. With only 55 minutes left to finish his mission, Hikaru calmed himself down to prepare for any eventuality. Hikaru was surprised when the window suddenly spoke, asking him if he wished to unlock the soul board. In exchange for unlocking the soul board, Hikaru was told that it would consume 1 energy point. After unlocking the soul board, Hikaru realized that he was staring at a skill board, a skill system that he always saw in games. Hikaru guessed that the system of the soul board might be similar to the skill systems in the games he used to play. Noticing that the points he had were only 14, Hikaru guessed that he had started with 15 and had used 1 point to unlock the soul board. Since his goal was to kill someone, Hikaru needed to approach his target with caution. After scrolling through all the skills on the skill board, Hikaru thought that he would have to spend at least 6 points to check out all the abilities. Seeing the magic option, Hikaru was unsure if his body could use magic, which made him decide to save that skill for later. Checking the strength option, Hikaru knew that the ability would be useful. However, he was unsure if melee combat would be appropriate for his current mission. Next, he checked the agility skill tree and immediately noticed the stealth skill. Observing the marks beneath the skill tree, Hikaru guessed that the skills without marks were unlockable. After unlocking more skills related to awareness and detection, Hikaru decided to use the rest of his points by distributing them evenly across the other skills. When another skill appeared in the skill tree, Hikaru was shocked to see that it was an assassination skill. The skill controlled the fate of an attack, ensuring it became lethal. Hikaru thought that the assassination skill came at a convenient time. Running out of time, Hikaru told himself that it was necessary for him to kill in order to survive in his new world. Hikaru noticed another skill option under assassination, and saw that it was a sniper skill, which is something he had needed from the beginning. Unfortunately, Hikaru had used up all of his points. With 35 minutes left before his mission ends, Hikaru decides to just use the skills he had obtained. After activating stealth, Hikaru could not believe that the skill actually worked. Hikaru felt like he was disappearing after activating the skill. Based on Roland's memory, the Count was currently in the city. Before leaving, Hikaru left the key on the table where the innkeeper was sitting. Surprised by the sudden appearance of the key, the innkeeper was puzzled and started to look around for someone. When Hikaru finally arrived at Count Morx's house, he first dried himself after being soaked in the rain. Realizing that the back door was locked, Hikaru was left with no other option than to go to the front. Hikaru was surprised when he saw two men who were about to head his way. Hikaru's nervousness slowly vanished when he realized that the two men did not notice him. Unable to believe that he had just walked into the house openly without even being noticed by the people inside, Hikaru was now very much impressed with the stealth ability. Running up through the stairs, Hikaru again encountered more people and immediately hid behind the desk. Hikaru became nervous again as the people had noticed that the floor was wet. The people's suspicion of an unknown person entering the house did not cross their minds when another man thought that the wet floor came from the Alchemist Guild. Hikaru then left after seeing the two patrolmen leaving the wet mark Hikaru had left. Impressed by the stealth skill, Hikaru was then informed by Roland that he only had 15 minutes left before his mission ends. Noticing a room that had its lights turned on, Hikaru leaned on the door and heard Count Morx's voice. Hikaru then realized that after he opened the door, he would have to bear the weight of killing a man. Hikaru became hesitant in opening the door, as he wondered if he would be alright after killing someone. With 10 minutes left, Hikaru came to terms with his fate and entered the room. Count Morx was checking through some documents when he heard his door open. Wondering if someone was outside, Count Morx asked if it was one of the knights. Count Morx decided to continue with his work as he guessed that he might just be imagining things. Hikaru, who was now behind the Count, continued to listen to the Count. All of a sudden, the stealth skill vanished, and Hikaru was no longer in control of the body. It turned out that Roland had switched places with Hikaru, as he did not want anyone else to take the opportunity of killing Count Morx from him. After introducing himself to Count Morx as Roland Nui Zarasha, Roland told Hikaru that he did not want his memory to be tainted by a murder. When Roland was about to stab the Count, he suddenly felt off balance and lost consciousness. With Hikaru's support from behind, Roland became more determined and successfully stabbed the Count. After twisting the blade and pulling it out, the Count then met his end in an instant. Seeing his hands shake, Roland could not believe that he had actually killed the Count. Hikaru confronted Roland, confirming whether he had planned on killing the Count himself from the beginning. After Roland confirmed Hikaru's theory, he then thanked Hikaru and informed him that the body was now his, since he no longer had money and honor left. After learning Hikaru's name, Roland told Hikaru that his memories would always be with him, and that he would always be praying for him. When Roland finally vanished, Hikaru immediately felt the weight of killing someone. Hikaru was surprised when someone asked him if he had killed the Count. Looking at the woman's features, Hikaru thought that the woman was really beautiful. Pointing out that the bell was ringing, the woman informed Hikaru that it meant that the knights were coming. Hikaru then remembered that the Count was trying to reach a bell, and wondered if it was the same bell that gave the signal to the knights. Wondering what his next steps would be, Hikaru also became curious if he could still use the stealth ability to escape. The woman then pointed out to Hikaru a rope ladder on the balcony, where he could climb down from the house. Hikaru was hesitant to trust the woman as he was not sure of the woman's intentions in helping a stranger who had just killed someone. After the woman told Hikaru to leave, Hikaru immediately went to the balcony, where he then saw the rope ladder. As the knights finally entered the Count's room, they were not expecting to see Miss Louvière inside. Upon learning of the Count's death, a knight immediately checked the balcony and only saw the rope ladder that Hikaru had used. The knights then started searching the second floor as they guessed that the culprit would still be there. After escaping the house, Hikaru finally sat down and reached a cemetery where he rested. Remembering the girl who had helped him, Hikaru became more curious about why the girl had decided to help him. Even though he was in an alternate world, Hikaru still felt everything was so unreal. What Hikaru was feeling in his right hand was the only thing that made him feel alive. A few days had passed since Hikaru's first mission, and he had now become an adventurer. The reason Hikaru became an adventurer was to make a living and to get a guild lead ID for free. The mission Hikaru was currently tasked with was to collect plants. When Hikaru finally saw the plant, he noticed a rustling sound behind the bush and was surprised when a wild boar came out. At first, Hikaru felt relieved that it was just a wild boar, but his relief immediately vanished and was replaced with fear as he faced a huge green wolf. According to the guild's data, green wolves lived in packs and were quite vicious. Knowing that he was within the killing range of the green wolf, Hikaru immediately ran. However, he then noticed that the wolves did not see him, and instead decided to eat the wild boar. Hikaru was protected by the guild's blessing, which worked in conjunction with his soul board. The one Hikaru was currently using was the Blessing of Protection. With the stealth skill combined, Hikaru became more confident and even collected the plants near the green wolves. Back at the guild receptionist, Fleuer, was being bombarded by other adventurers trying to hit on her. One of the adventurers was surprised when Hikaru approached the receptionist without him noticing it. Fleuer's cheerful attitude turned sour when Hikaru asked for another mission. Hikaru was then approached by another adventurer named Chernenko Regalo, who told him to wait for his turn. Hikaru learned that he could also see the soul boards of other people and realized that he might be the only one with that ability. When Hikaru tried to taunt Chernenko, another adventurer stepped in between them and stopped Chernenko from causing any problems. Before leaving, Chernenko told Hikaru that he would remember his actions. Worried, Fleuer asked Hikaru if he would be okay after taunting Chernenko. Hikaru reassured Fleuer that he would be fine, as he was sure the adventurer he had spoken to was not strong enough. Surprised by Hikaru's judgment, Fleuer informed him that Chernenko had a good reputation for physical ability in the guild. Hikaru also learned that Chernenko knew how to use 5 characters of blessings and had a strong selection. Compared to all the blessings Hikaru had accumulated, he still was not afraid of Chernenko. After reassuring Fleuer that he would be fine, Hikaru placed all of the poisonous plants on the table and told Fleuer that those were all the poisonous plants he had picked up. Fleuer becomes worried for Hikaru again, as she informs him that the place where the poisonous plants grow is being inhabited by ferocious monsters that are called griffin wolves. Wondering why the wolves did not attack Hikaru, Fleuer guessed that Hikaru was just lucky. After evaluating the plants, Fleuer then handed Hikaru his reward. Before Hikaru leaves, Fleuer asks him if he plans to head home for the night already. Hikaru responds that he may take another mission since he still has some time left. Fleuer then asks Hikaru to wait, as she is determined to look for a mission that is well suited for Hikaru. Standing all alone, Hikaru suddenly wonders what happened to the girl that had helped him before. When Fleuer finally returns, she becomes embarrassed and asks Hikaru what he is doing. When Hikaru asks Fleuer if she has heard any news of someone important being killed, Fleuer tells him that such a story is best kept secret since only a few people know about it. Listening to Fleuer, Hikaru wanted to confirm with her if some other adventurer was involved. Fleuer then shared with Hikaru that a government official came to her to consult about new arrivals to the Adventurers Guild. Fleuer was also asked to investigate if there are adventurers involved in a murder. After explaining to Hikaru why the information must be kept as a secret, Fleuer then showed Hikaru the list of jobs that she recommends for him. Fleuer then pointed out to Hikaru how different he is from the others, as she has never received a thank you from anyone since she started working, and wished that there were more adventurers like Hikaru. When Fleuer asks Hikaru what mission he will take from the jobs she recommended, Hikaru thought about the mission at first but then decided to refuse them all. Remembering what Fleuer mentioned about redhorn rabbits, Hikaru came across a redhorn rabbit and was now very much closer to it because of his stealth ability. After killing the redhorn rabbit, Hikaru was surprised when light suddenly appeared around him. After realizing that he had gained a level, Hikaru was very eager to use all of the points he had accumulated. Thanks to the stealth skill, Hikaru had been grinding a lot of quests. While walking through the streets, Hikaru overheard the knights talking about Count Morx's killer being identified. From what Hikaru heard from the patrolman, the murderer of Count Morx has been identified and captured. However, catching the culprit would be impossible since it was Hikaru who had killed the Count. Hikaru now wonders who the knights have captured in his place. Fleuer then calls for Hikaru's attention, asking him if he is even listening to her. Finally getting Hikaru's attention, Fleuer tells him that the redhorn rabbit will take some time to evaluate. When Hikaru asks why it would take some time, an old man approaches the receptionist, explaining that the reason is they have to compensate better than the Alchemist Guild and the Apothecary Guild. Fleuer recognizes the old man and calls him Unken. Upon checking the redhorn rabbit, Unken assesses its quality and mentions how rare and well-preserved it is, saying there is nothing they can match in the market right now. When Hikaru asks Fleuer about the old man's identity, Unken overhears Hikaru's question and tells him that he is just an appraiser. Checking the old man's soul board, Hikaru learns that the old man is Unken Phi Balzac. What puzzles Hikaru even more is how strong Unken is, having a much higher skill level than Hikaru. Checking through the skill tree, Hikaru is able to confirm his theory about why Unken is much stronger. Unken has also unlocked a soul board that Hikaru has not yet unlocked. Hikaru also learns that Unken has already solved all 7 soul boards. Considering Unken's skill sets and soul boards, Hikaru wonders if he is interacting with the guildmaster. As Unken points out how Hikaru is staring at him as if he were some target, Hikaru immediately changes his attitude and asks how long he will have to wait. When Unken responds that Hikaru will know by tonight, Hikaru does not expect that the assessment will be much quicker. After Hikaru confirms that Fluere is now done with her work for the day, he then asks her a personal question and wonders if she has time for it. Roaming around the town, Hikaru immediately senses that he is being followed by 3 men. Hikaru then learns that he is being followed by none other than Chernenko. With Hikaru's detection skills, he can sense people's intentions without needing to see them, turning into a corner. Chernenko and his colleagues then follow Hikaru. However, they are surprised when they do not see him. Using his stealth skill, Hikaru is just standing in front of Chernenko, who orders the others to look for Hikaru. After Hikaru successfully evades Chernenko, he finally arrives at his destination. Observing the customers' outfits, Hikaru wonders if what he is wearing is even suited for the place. Hikaru's face turns red when he sees Fluere just arriving. Hikaru then compliments Fluere's looks, which also makes Fluere blush. Wanting to know the truth, Hikaru asks Fluere if it is really okay for him to ask the question. Realizing that she was not invited for just tea, Fluere put down the knife and fork as she felt disappointed, being seen only as the girl who provides useful information to newbies. To brighten Fluere's mood, Hikaru tells her that he will buy her a drink and something else to eat. Fluere chose some expensive beverage and food from the menu, and she was surprised at how easily Hikaru agreed with her choice. When the smoothie finally arrived, Hikaru was curious about why the drink had 2 straws. Embarrassed, Fluere pushed the smoothie toward him, wanting Hikaru to drink it. Seeing Fluere getting sad, Hikaru did not want to upset her further and agreed to drink the smoothie with her. After having a taste of the smoothie, Hikaru was impressed by how delicious it was. When Hikaru was about to ask something, Fluere interrupted him and mentioned that she would answer anything except for her address. After reassuring Fluere that he would not ask for her address, her expression turned serious when Hikaru mentioned that the culprit of Count Morx's murder had already been captured. When Hikaru explained that he overheard some patrolmen talking about it, Fluere could not believe Hikaru's words, as the information itself was considered highly classified. When Hikaru asked Fluere if she knew who the culprit was, Fluere apologized to Hikaru, saying she could not tell him even if she knew who the culprit was. Understanding Fluere's circumstance, Hikaru decided not to press her further with the question. When Fluere asked Hikaru why he wanted to know such information, Hikaru responded that his friends had a bad experience with the Count, and were even chased out by him. That reason alone made Hikaru curious about the Count. Touched by Hikaru's reason, Fluere couldn't help but tell Hikaru that the culprit was the first person who had found the dead body, had been sent to the royal court, and that the sentence would be carried out in 3 days. After thanking Fluere for the information, Hikaru remembered that the first person to find Count Morx dead was none other than the girl who had saved his life. Wondering if the girl was being treated like an animal, it made no sense to Hikaru that the girl had been captured. Hikaru then decided that it was now his turn to save the girl. At night, 2 patrolmen were very happy, since their night watch was about to end. Passing through the patrolmen, Hikaru could not believe that he had come back to the house of Count Morx. Hikaru went to the guard station first, then to the SRC detention center. However, he could not find the girl. Seeing how the security had gotten tighter than before, Hikaru wondered where the girl was. When Hikaru tried opening the door, he found out that the door was locked. Peeking into the hall, Hikaru was surprised to see a patrolman with a dog. With the ability granted by the god of the occult, Hikaru believed that it was not necessary for him to be overly cautious. Hikaru thought of an idea involving the dog. After luring the dog toward the locked room, the patrolman opened the door to check if someone was inside. When the patrolman did not find anyone, he left along with the dog. Unbeknownst to the patrolman and the dog, Hikaru had successfully infiltrated the locked room. Although the plan was a bit risky, Hikaru was still glad that it worked. Not expecting to see lots of books in the room, Hikaru picked one and immediately realized that the room was owned by a boy who liked adventure stories. However, Hikaru was curious as to why the interior looked so elegant. Seeing a familiar cloth on the bed, Hikaru remembered that it was the same cloth the girl had worn. Hikaru was then alarmed when he heard footsteps outside the room. The 2 patrolmen were talking about the investigation, as one of the patrolmen thought it was silly to accuse the first person who found the body of being the killer. As Hikaru wondered if the 2 were talking about the girl, He was surprised when he heard that the girl was trapped in the basement. Hikaru immediately went to the lower part of the house. Hikaru thought how convenient it was that they only had one guard to guard the girl. After going up the stairs, Hikaru tried opening the door. However, it was locked. Planning to look for the key upstairs, Hikaru suddenly heard something. Peeking from the basement, Hikaru learned that it was another guard who was now blocking his way at the entrance. When Hikaru was about to step out of the basement, he could not believe it when the guard mentioned that it was now time for him to do his rounds. Hikaru became nervous, as the location he was currently in was so narrow that, even with his stealth activated, he might still bump into the guard. Realizing that he had ruined his chance, Hikaru then thought of his murder skill and wondered if he could kill the two patrolmen. As the two patrolmen were about to head to the basement, Hikaru once again accepted his fate that he would have to take another life. When the patrolmen were about to turn, they were stopped by a maid who was holding a knife. The patrolman asked the maid to calm down and put down the knife. Knowing that he had saved himself from another bloodshed, Hikaru felt relieved. While the long-haired guard was trying to calm the maid down, Hikaru took the opportunity and took the key to the door. After getting inside the room, Hikaru sat down, as the thought of killing an innocent person had exhausted him. Now back on his feet, Hikaru approached a cage where he found the girl who had saved him. After Hikaru confirmed that he was Count Morx's murderer, he then told the girl that he had come to save her. When the girl mentioned that she could never get out of the cage, Hikaru immediately realized that she was trapped inside a magic prison. Upon learning that the key to the prison was a man, the girl thought that killing the man might be the solution. However, she was not confident that Hikaru could help her out. When Hikaru asked why she thought he could not help her, the girl responded that based on what she saw in Hikaru's eyes, Hikaru was not capable of killing innocent people. Hikaru tried persuading the girl to escape with him. However, the girl did not budge and only informed Hikaru that she had already served her purpose when he killed Count Morx. Continuing the conversation, Hikaru found out that the girl was Count Morx's daughter. When Hikaru asked the girl if she was on house arrest, the girl told Hikaru that the Count was afraid of her, but she couldn't get rid of him because he was someone important. After pointing out that the master of the Alchemist Guild had specifically made the cage for her, the girl then demonstrated her powers, which surprised Hikaru. After showing her powers, the girl thanked Hikaru for trying to save her, as she had no idea that there would even be anyone who wanted to help her. When Hikaru asked who had framed her, the girl simply told Hikaru that she would soon be taken to the royal capital, where the king would showcase her powers to his subjects. Once the entire country learned of the girl's powers, she would be forced to work under the king as an assassin to atone for the sin of killing her father. Hikaru was shocked to learn that the king would turn the girl into a murderer by exploiting her own powers. Although the girl faced such an unfavorable fate, she still smiled in front of Hikaru, comforted by the thought that there was still someone who cared for her. Hikaru could not understand why the girl was so carefree, giving up her life so easily. After being told by the girl to leave as the guards were about to return, Hikaru then noticed how her hands were shaking. Along with the mountain of storybooks in the room, Hikaru wondered if the girl had truly given up on living. When Hikaru asked the girl for her name, she said there was no point in him hearing her name as he would just forget it. Removing his mask, Hikaru introduced himself to the girl, which surprised her. The girl then introduced herself as Lavia von Morgstand. When Hikaru was about to say something, Lavia stopped him as she did not want to get her hopes up. After telling Hikaru that killing the Count was enough of a favor for her, and that she could not ask for more, she did not expect to hear from Hikaru's mouth that he would save her. Admitting how he truly did not want to kill anyone, Hikaru then told Lavia that he would get her out without killing anyone. Regardless of whether Lavia accepted his help or not, Hikaru would still try to free her. With her hope now returning, Lavia asked Hikaru if she could truly trust him, and if she would just be a burden to him. Hikaru did not care, as he already owed his life to her. With tears in her eyes, Lavia promised Hikaru that she would give her all to him if he could save her. The doors to the room suddenly opened as the guards arrived for their routine inspection. Seeing Lavia on the bed, the guards no longer paid any attention to her. Unbeknownst to the guards, Hikaru had been in the room moments before they entered, and had successfully slipped out as they came in. With his new goal to save Lavia, Hikaru had only 3 days left to execute his escape plan. There were several things Hikaru must do before he rescues Lavia, and one of those things is to earn money, as he will need it for himself and to hide Lavia after rescuing her. Returning to the guild, Hikaru noticed an unfamiliar face at the reception desk. While wondering where Fluere might be, Hikaru is also curious about what the guild's plan is to accomplish by hiring all the beautiful women. Looking at the jobs posted, Hikaru thought that he was out of luck, as the rewards for the jobs were not enough. Based on his current rank, Hikaru could not get enough requests. Hikaru was then approached by the receptionist he had seen earlier, who wanted to check Hikaru's guild card. After being asked if Hikaru had any requests to make, Hikaru wondered why the girl was talking to him. Seeing the papers the woman, whose name was Gloria, was holding, Hikaru wondered if Gloria was going to post a new request form. With one look at Hikaru's guild card, Gloria thought that Hikaru was just an ordinary adventurer and did not expect that Fluere would obsess over him. Seeing that everything about Hikaru appeared ordinary, Gloria believed that there was something else that caught Fluere's attention. Gloria then asked Hikaru if he had any other blessings besides the civilian blessing. Using her position as a member of the guild, Gloria wanted to know if that was Hikaru's secret. However, Hikaru simply denied that he had any other blessings. Wondering at first if she was mistaken, Gloria then considered that Fluere might have informed Hikaru to hide his blessing. Believing that Fluere might have found a great rookie, Gloria thought that Hikaru should be obsessed with her instead of Fluere. Giving Hikaru a flyer, Gloria informed him that it was a delivery job she believed Hikaru could finish quickly. Hikaru was pleased with the job request as he believed that he could finish it within a day. Offering to discuss the request further with Hikaru, Gloria suggested that he wait for her at the stall. Grateful to receive such a request, Hikaru then became more puzzled, as he did not expect that people would dare to live in the sewers. Not worried about the bats attacking since he had activated his stealth, Hikaru was still having a difficult time as the sewer was very dark. When Hikaru was about to turn on his lamp, he immediately stopped after hearing voices entering the sewers. As the two men were mocking their customer, they then noticed footprints on the floor and wondered whose they were. Hikaru told himself that he would have to be more careful, as a simple mistake like leaving a footprint could mean his cover would be blown. Hiding behind a wall, Hikaru decided not to use the lamp, as the light would just give away his presence and location. When one of the men mentioned the name Kelbeck, it intrigued Hikaru and he decided to follow the two men. All Hikaru knew about Kelbeck was that he was an obsolete toolmaker, but he then believed there was more to Kelbeck than that. When the two men entered the room, they were immediately scolded by a man with a tattoo on his face. After reprimanding the two, the man then praised them for still managing to do a good job. When the two men finally left the room, the man was surprised when he saw Hikaru inside and asked for his identity. Now that his presence had been revealed, Hikaru tried to calm the man down and explained that he had only come for a delivery. When Hikaru asked the man if the letter was what he wanted, the man gritted his teeth, curious about why he felt afraid of Hikaru. Upon checking the letter, the man realized that Hikaru was a messenger from the guild. When Hikaru asked the man how he had ended up in the sewers, the man invited Hikaru to sit down, saying he would explain it to him. After confirming that the man in front of him was none other than Kelbeck, Hikaru was questioned about who had directed him to the sewers. Unimpressed by Hikaru's vague answers, Kelbeck asked his guards if they had seen a strange kid come by. Seeing how confused the guards were, Kelbeck realized that Hikaru had managed to sneak into the room without the guards noticing, something Kelbeck thought was impossible. Assuming it was merely a coincidence that Hikaru had gotten past the guards, Kelbeck praised him for his courage and asked what he wanted. When Hikaru requested Kelbeck's signature on the quest request form, he immediately stood up after receiving the signed form. Before Hikaru could leave, Kelbeck asked if Hikaru knew who he really was. Hikaru guessed that Kelbeck might be a mage or an important member of some secret organization, but clarified that Kelbeck's background did not interest him. Kelbeck then revealed that they were part of the Thieves Guild. Although they were thieves, Kelbeck explained, they adhered to a code that prohibited stealing from the poor. Kelbeck told Hikaru that if he ever needed help, he could call on them. However, the help they offered would come at a cost. Before leaving, Hikaru told Kelbeck not to trouble the Adventurers Guild. Realizing how intimidating Hikaru truly was, Kelbeck thought Hikaru was someone worth keeping an eye on. Back at the guild, Gloria was chatting with other adventurers while wondering about Hikaru and his quest. Knowing the true identity of the recipient of the quest, Gloria had already been expecting to hear from the Thieves Guild regarding Hikaru. To Gloria's surprise, Hikaru appeared in front of her, handing over the signed quest form. When Hikaru told Gloria that he had met Kelbeck and that nothing extraordinary had happened, Gloria's expression briefly changed before she returned to her usual cheerful demeanor. After handing Hikaru his reward, Gloria became even more curious as to how Hikaru had managed to meet Kelbeck, the head of the Thieves Guild, a person notoriously difficult to encounter. Holding up his reward, Hikaru then ran into Unken, who informed him that the price of redhorn rabbits had gone up. Hikaru was shocked to learn that the price for the redhorn rabbit had risen to 140,000. Using his guild card as a bank card, Hikaru deposited 100,000 onto his card, while receiving the remaining amount in cash. Not expecting redhorn rabbits to be so highly valued, Hikaru then called for Unken, as he wanted the old man to answer a few questions for him. The quest to find the ransom money for Lavia has concluded very quickly, all thanks to Hikaru's redhorn rabbit. There were only 2 things left to do before Lavia was transferred. Hikaru had to find information about the transfer. Deep in the forest, Hikaru believed that it was the safest place to hunt and raise his spirit level as well. A couple of days ago, Hikaru asked Unken if there were dangerous monsters that he should watch out for. Glaring at Hikaru, Unken asked him why he wanted to know such information. Nervous under Unken's intense stare, Hikaru explained that he would be staying for a few days to earn the money and believed that it would be necessary for him to enter the forest in the future. Seeing Hikaru's point, Unken informed him that there were 4 creatures he should be especially careful of. The 4 were the green wolves, giant bees, forest barbarians, and goblins. Surprised that Unken would mention goblins, Hikaru was then told by Unken that goblins had been spotted near the city. Information circulating in the streets suggested that if there was 1 goblin, it meant there were 300 more in hiding. Since Hikaru had never heard of giant bees and forest barbarians before, Unken explained to him that giant bees were large bugs with vestigial wings. Although these bugs typically worked alone, they would not hesitate to call for reinforcements if they felt threatened. The forest barbarian, on the other hand, was a creature about 10 feet tall with 4 arms and 1 eye. Based on what Hikaru heard from Unken, he could immediately tell that the forest barbarian was a truly terrifying monster. After being advised to get as far away from such creatures as possible, Hikaru then asked Unken where he should avoid to ensure he would not run into them. Sighing, Unken advised Hikaru to just avoid going too deep into the forest, especially around the root of the mountains. Unken also warned Hikaru to avoid the eastern lake, as it was common knowledge that it was a territory where dangerous monsters gathered. Arriving at the eastern lake, Hikaru observed the area and could already tell that Unken had not been lying when he mentioned how dangerous the place was. Hikaru thought of hunting the monsters randomly, but then realized that such a plan would not be efficient. His goal was to target a dangerous monster that most would avoid, as defeating such monsters would provide substantial experience. Although Hikaru was eager to take on powerful beasts, he still did not want to encounter the giant bees and goblins, as they were difficult to defeat due to their large numbers. When Hikaru finally spotted a green wolf, he immediately activated his stealth skill to move closer to the creature undetected. Now that Hikaru was within range, he was able to catch the green wolf off guard and stab it in the side. Thanks to the effects of his assassination skill, Hikaru easily killed the green wolf. Hikaru was startled when he suddenly felt a strange sensation within him. Once things finally settled, Hikaru checked his soul board and did not expect his rank to rise in such a significant way. Realizing that the guilt he had been feeling was beginning to subside, Hikaru learned that he was now growing accustomed to murder. Knowing that his heart controls the fate of his kills, Hikaru remembered the time he stormed the Count's mansion and considered killing the knight just for peace of mind. Hikaru then decided that he had to establish some rules for taking a life. The first rule was that he must not hesitate in killing someone after making his decision. The second rule was that Hikaru must prepare himself carefully when performing an infiltration. The third rule was that Hikaru must think through all the possibilities before making his move. Fortunately for Hikaru, his stealth skills were highly useful for gathering information. After gaining more points, Hikaru rested on a branch while thinking about how to gain even more points before assigning them. Just as Hikaru was about to start hunting again, he was interrupted by a faint sound coming from not far away. Deep in the forest, a group of people was being surrounded and attacked by goblins. As the goblins grew increasingly impatient, the group found themselves in a very difficult situation. Pauline, the healer of the group, was asked by 2 female warriors named Pia and Priscilla to do something. Seeing the grotesque faces of the goblins, Pauline regretted ever joining the group. A couple of hours before they were trapped by the goblins, Pauline and her 2 comrades had been approached by other adventurers who asked if they wanted to join forces for profit. Pia wasted no time accepting the adventurer's offer, while Pauline hesitated and asked Pia to wait, insisting that they think about the offer more carefully. Pia, however, reminded Pauline of their shared reason for becoming adventurers, reassuring her that if they made a lot of money, they could bring happiness to everyone in their village. Pauline, worried about the location they were heading to, voiced her concerns. A bald adventurer interrupted their conversation and reassured them that there were no large monsters near the eastern lake. Convinced by Pia's words and reassurances, Pauline's worries lessened, and she eventually agreed to go. In the present, while Pauline, Pia, and Priscilla fought desperately for their lives, the bald adventurer was suddenly struck by an arrow. Seeing this, the male adventurers in the group realized they were up against a horde of goblins. Lacking confidence in their ability to fight off so many enemies, the leader of the adventurers revealed his true intentions, admitting that he thought he could take advantage of a novice. The leader turned to Pauline and asked if she knew what the goblins wanted. Pauline was horrified when the man revealed that the goblins sought women who could bear children. Hearing this, Pauline let out a scream, which was heard by Pia and Priscilla. However, before they could intervene, the other male adventurers distracted them while the leader dragged Pauline toward the horde. Pushed to the ground, Pauline froze in terror as she came face to face with a swarm of goblins. At that moment, she thought about how becoming an adventurer had been a terrible mistake. Pauline had always believed that if she became an adventurer and left her village to move to the big city, she would magically meet a handsome young man with a flushed and charming demeanor. Realizing how foolish she had been to believe in such a fairy tale, Pauline squeezed her eyes shut. Confused, she began to wonder why the goblins hadn't attacked her yet. When she finally opened her eyes, she was shocked to see a young man standing in front of her, extending a hand. Taking Hikaru's hand, Pauline couldn't help but feel that what had just happened was a fated encounter. With his actions, Hikaru was now trapped along with Pauline. When Hikaru instructed Pauline to fall back, he was surprised when Pauline suddenly lunged at him. Pauline could not contain her emotions even during such a difficult situation. The male adventurer called Hikaru a stupid kid for interfering with his plan, mentioning that sacrificing Pauline would give them the opportunity to escape. Hikaru initially wondered why the adventurer kicked Pauline, but then realized that Pauline had just been used as a decoy to enable their escape. When Pia overheard Hikaru, she became enraged and shifted her focus from the goblins to the male adventurer. The adventurer tried to defend himself by explaining that what he did was the only option they had for surviving. Hikaru then interrupted the adventurer, informing him that the goblins would be retreating soon. The adventurer did not believe Hikaru at first, but was surprised when he witnessed that all of the goblins became frightened and immediately ran for their lives. Hikaru then told the adventurers that they should escape while they still could, since staying was an option they would likely regret. When the male adventurers finally left, Hikaru turned to the three girls and asked if they were fine. Pia reassured Hikaru that they were just fine, pointing to Pauline and informing Hikaru that they had a healer with them. When Pia learned that Hikaru would be leaving the forest, she guessed that Hikaru might be strong enough to handle the monsters. Hikaru then reminded the girls to be wary of the men on their way back. Seeing Pia's confused look, Hikaru explained that the people they had been with were known for using others as decoys. He warned that if a rumor got out about their party's terrible behavior, no novice adventurer would party with them. Still not understanding Hikaru's point, Priscilla finally spoke up and mentioned that the party they had been with would use any methods to keep their secret from being known, even silencing those who might reveal it. Pia then remembered that two of their companions had left with the party, calling the two stupid for choosing the wrong side. Not wanting to get involved any further, Hikaru excused himself. Before Hikaru could leave, Pauline asked him to wait and then introduced herself. After learning Hikaru's name, Pauline asked him for a favor, which was to escort the three of them to the lake. Both Pia and Priscilla agreed with Pauline's favor and hoped that Hikaru would accept. Hikaru agreed to help and told the three to go at their own pace while he watched from a distance. Hoping to get a little closer to Hikaru, Pauline asked if he could stay by their side. Knowing that his abilities would become useless if he didn't stay hidden, Hikaru told Pauline he would remain out of sight, but reassured her that he would be nearby. Reminded of Pauline's lustful expression, Hikaru pointed out how unsettled he felt when she pretended to have a pure heart after what had happened. Pia and Priscilla agreed with Hikaru, as they had already known that Pauline was a little weird. Pauline was shocked that her secret had finally come to light. As the three journeyed to the lake, Hikaru followed closely behind them, using his stealth. Hikaru was thankful to have gathered valuable information from the archives in advance, as it had taught him how to deal with the goblin family. Hearing a sound not far off, Hikaru immediately went to investigate. Observing from the top of a cliff, Hikaru saw how Pauline and the others were being surrounded by so many goblins. Knowing his stealth would not be of great help in fighting a horde, Hikaru scanned the surrounding areas and quickly located the goblin boss. Based on what Hikaru read, the rest of the goblins would be confused if he killed the boss. Hikaru then decided to increase his strength by 1 after seeing the goblin boss sporting a pretty good set of equipment. While the goblins were busy watching Pauline and the others being surrounded, Hikaru took the opportunity to sneak closer to the goblin boss. When the other goblins witnessed how their boss suddenly spit out blood and died on the spot, they became confused and didn't even notice Hikaru leaving. Stepping back, Hikaru once again felt that his rank had increased. Checking his soul board, Hikaru didn't expect his rank to increase 3 times. Although the goblins stopped moving after the death of their boss, Hikaru still wanted to take precautions and added 1 point to explosiveness to increase his speed. In just a matter of seconds, Hikaru was able to close the gap and kill a goblin with 1 stab. After their fight with the goblin horde, Hikaru escorted Pauline and the others to a safe area where they could continue their journey. After parting ways with the female adventurers, Hikaru decided to resume hunting monsters. Seeing the sun setting, Hikaru realized that he had leveled up more than enough. The forest barbarian Hikaru defeated at the very end was enormous. With 10 points left to allocate to whichever skill he needed, the next task on Hikaru's list was to gather information about the day of Lavia's transfer. With all the information Hikaru had gathered so far, he theorized that an adventurer might be in charge of the convoy for the transfer. Returning to the guild, Hikaru didn't expect to meet Pia and the others again. Upon learning that the party who had threatened Pauline's life had been handled, Pia told Hikaru that they wanted him to testify. When Hikaru asked what they wanted him to testify about, Fleuer then joined the conversation and told Hikaru that the guild would like to know more about what goblins are really like. After sharing a drink together, Fleuer asked Hikaru what his deal was, as he was now getting involved with other girls. Later that night, Hikaru found himself at a restaurant with Fleuer and the adventurers he had saved. Hikaru understood why he had to meet with Fleuer, but was confused as to why Pia and the others were tagging along. Hikaru made it clear to the others that he wouldn't be treating them. Fleuer felt that the three girls would just end up following them, so she decided to let them act however they wanted. Hikaru then asked Fleuer if the guild would be fine with it being unattended. Fleuer reassured Hikaru that the guild was fine since Unken was still there. Hikaru's table was then approached by a man who was introduced by Fleuer as the owner of the restaurant. Upon learning that the boy in front of him was Hikaru, the owner of the red-horned rabbit, the shop owner immediately asked Hikaru if he could sell the rabbit to him, offering to pay a little extra. Hearing the owner's offer, Fleuer intervened and told him that the Wholesalers Association would give the Adventurers Guild trouble if he purchased the rabbit directly from Hikaru. After telling Fleuer that he was only joking, the owner then revealed that he was far more interested in the rabbit's guts after learning they were just being thrown away. Trying to strike a deal with Hikaru, the owner suddenly called him Lad. Not amused by the term, Hikaru asked the owner if he referred to his business partners as Lad. Upon seeing Hikaru's serious expression, the owner apologized and told Hikaru that he had taken a liking to him, adding that anything they ordered would be on the house. Although they would be eating for free, the owner still told Hikaru that in exchange for the food, he hoped Hikaru would consider his proposal. Unsure of what had just happened, all the girls became excited when Hikaru explained that they would be eating for free tonight. While eating their pasta, Hikaru informed Fleuer about how he killed the goblin leader and successfully escaped. Fleuer was impressed with Hikaru after hearing that he had read everything in the encyclopedia, which is where he had learned how to defeat the goblins. With information making the difference between life and death, Hikaru also pointed out that fighting an entire goblin horde was a load of nonsense. Realizing their mistake, Pia properly thanked Hikaru for saving them and asked how they could repay him. Both Priscilla and Pauline started arguing when they each offered something special. Hikaru told the three that he didn't want anything from them. However, he hoped that all of them, including Fleuer, would not tell anyone about him, as he didn't want to be an adventurer who stood out too much. After saying his piece, Hikaru then asked Fleuer if the adventurers who would be escorting the convoy were already in Pondo. Seeing Fleuer's reaction, Hikaru was able to confirm his guess. After explaining in detail how he had guessed that adventurers would be a part of the convoy, Fleuer wasn't sure how to react, since secret information had been unveiled due to Hikaru's sharpness. As Hikaru wondered if the adventurers who would be part of the convoy were skilled, Fleuer then mentioned that the adventurers in charge of the transfer would be a party of 4 female B-rank adventurers. While listening to Fleuer and Hikaru's conversation, Pia couldn't help but spit out her food when she heard that there were 4 B-rank adventurers in Pondo. Hikaru wondered if the rank was truly impressive. Fleuer further explained that being a B rank was incredible in itself, since the highest rank in Pondo was just D rank. In the capital, there was only 1 A rank and 10 B ranks, including the 4 female adventurers. When Hikaru mentioned that having 10 B ranks was already quite a lot, Fleuer guessed that Hikaru had never been to the capital before, and told him that the capital's population was 50 times larger than Pondo. Fleuer informed Hikaru that the name of the B-rankers was the 4 Stars of the East, and that their completion rate for requests had been 100% so far. After gathering the information Hikaru needed from Fleuer, he then went to the guild that is located at Pondo to find out what kind of people the B-rankers are. Meanwhile, Unken is being asked by an old man not to worry too much. Unken retorted, telling the old man that he is strange for being so calm even when things do not go as planned. After being asked by Unken about their identities, the 3 mysterious men called themselves the Distant Glittering Stars. The spokesperson of the group shared that he is a C rank and told Unken that he should be grateful their party came to a second-rate city like Pondo. Unbeknownst to everyone, Hikaru was on the other side of the wall. With the use of his life detection ability, Hikaru did not expect that there would be many people inside. After recognizing Unken and the submaster, as well as the receptionist, Hikaru guessed that the others present were the adventurers who would escort Lavia. Hikaru becomes wary, as it was not the information he had gotten from Fleuer. Checking the lifeboard of the party's spokesperson, Hikaru learned that his name was Nogusa, and that he was a magic swordsman. Although Nogusa had 1 point in life detection, Hikaru believed that it was not enough to see through his stealth. After checking the other two, Hikaru determined that they were not much better. Hikaru felt a little bit happy knowing that he would not have to face the 4 stars of the East. While Hikaru remained hidden and observed everyone else, Unken asked the glittering stars how they planned to escort the carriage with just the 3 of them. Nogusa responded to Unken, informing him that no bandit would be dumb enough to attack C-rankers like them. If, in any case, bandits did attack, Nogusa was confident that they could easily take the bandits down. Nogusa reassured Unken that they were not just replacements for the 4 stars of the East, and that Unken could expect better from their party. The submaster became worried when Nogusa threatened the guild by saying he would return to the capital. After seeing the submaster's reaction, Nogusa then made it clear to the submaster what the plan was, to which the submaster responded that they had already reserved the place. Surprised that the glittering stars would spend the night out even though the escort mission was tomorrow, the submaster defended the glittering stars, reassuring Unken that the party would arrive in the capital by the evening. Unken could only let out a sigh as he wondered what had become of the guild's capital. The receptionist then explained to Unken that the guild had started raising adventurers' ranks since the war began. By raising the adventurers' ranks, they could get more money from the kingdom when a wartime request came in. Just knowing that there was a master swordsman in the capital lessened Unken's worries and made him doubt that something bad would happen. Confused, the receptionist asked Unken which master swordsman he was talking about. When Unken asked the receptionist if she did not know about Lawrence, the receptionist recognized Lawrence as the captain of the Royal Knights and the strongest longsword wielder on the continent. The receptionist then realized that the master swordsman Unken was referring to was none other than Lawrence. Gaining this new information, Hikaru no longer paid any attention to Lawrence as it did not matter since Lawrence was in the capital. Hikaru then left the guild upon realizing that the meeting was done. Feeling luckier upon learning that the adventurers in charge of the convoy not only lacked one person but also were not strong enough, Hikaru hastily gathered last-minute information and prepared to go. Meanwhile, the guards at the mansion of Count Morks were talking to each other, as one of them was still not convinced that Lavia was the culprit. Although the investigator had not yet arrived, it was already being assumed that Lavia was the murderer. When asked if he was defying the orders of their captain, the guard made it clear that he was not defying any orders. He was just not convinced. Back in the basement, Lavia was handcuffed with cuffs that were designed to be removed after some time. After the old man pointed out that the magic in the cuffs would only last until later at night, the guard reassured him that it would not be a problem as they were confident that Lavia would arrive at the capital before nightfall. When Lavia stepped out of the cage, the guard was surprised when he suddenly felt the wind blowing through his hair. When Lavia finally stepped outside of the mansion, she suddenly lost her balance after looking at the sun. After pointing out to Lavia that the carriage was not far from them, the guard noticed unfamiliar faces. The guild submaster and the guard were having an argument, as the guard became angry when the adventurers they had requested did not appear. While the submaster was busy arguing with the royal knights, Nogusa noticed another knight approaching them along with Lavia. When the knight overheard Nogusa praising Lavia's beauty, he asked Nogusa if they were drunk. When Nogusa admitted that they were, the knight then confronted Nogusa, informing him that they were not in the right condition to escort someone. After helping Lavia get settled inside the carriage, the long-haired knight was a bit annoyed after witnessing how the adventurers were drooling over Lavia. Calling for the coachman, the long-haired knight warned him not to open the carriage if the adventurers insisted, as he could tell that Nogusa and the others had no restraint. The coachman became scared after being told by the knight that the case they were investigating involved the nobility of the kingdom, and that he would be blamed if anything went wrong. As the carriage departed, the knight named Isuto scowled. Another knight then approached Isuto, pointing out that he seemed to be in a bad mood. After explaining that it was because of their mission, Isuto immediately recognized the voice. Upon turning around, Isuto was able to confirm that the knight standing behind him was none other than the captain of the knights. Lawrence then shared with Isuto that the king had sent him to supervise. Isuto then asked Lawrence for a favor, as he wanted to accompany the convoy since he did not trust the adventurers. However, Lawrence did not approve of Isuto's favor, as he wished to proceed according to the law in the presence of the investigator. After telling Isuto not to be persistent, Lawrence then assured him that he understood his worries. Wanting to know more about the case of Count Morks, Lawrence asked Isuto to talk to him first since the investigator had still not yet arrived. When the coachman handed over the papers for their transport, he noticed how the horse pulling the carriage seemed heavier than before. Checking the carriage, the coachman did not see any problem and decided to ignore his thoughts. In the middle of the road, Nogusa approached the coachman and ordered him to hand over the keys. When the coachman refused to give the keys, Nogusa became mad and threatened the coachman. Nogusa's attention was suddenly drawn by one of his men, who pointed out a body ahead of them. When the person on the ground asked for water, Nogusa handed over his water and did not ask for anything in return. In exchange for his help, Nogusa asked the person to spread his name as the man who would become a hero. Continuing on their journey, Nogusa felt bored and once again shifted his attention to the carriage. The group then temporarily stopped after Nogusa ordered the coachman to stop the carriage so they could take a break. When the coachman stepped off the carriage to rest, Nogusa again approached him, asking for the key. When the coachman still refused to give the key, Nogusa lost his patience and struck the coachman before taking the key from him. Opening the carriage, Nogusa became excited as he prepared to do something terrible to Lavia. However, to Nogusa's surprise, there was no one inside when he removed the blanket. While the other adventurers were talking, they suddenly heard Nogusa cursing from the carriage. Wondering what was happening, the two asked Nogusa what his problem was. Nogusa then told the two that the woman they were escorting had vanished. A few hours ago, while sitting inside the carriage, Lavia thought that what Hikaru promised was a lie and that she was just hoping for nothing. Lavia then thought that things were only natural, as she was sure that no one would dare to make an enemy of the king by trying to save her. After sighing, Lavia was surprised when she heard someone talking beside her, telling her of a saying that happiness escapes with every sight. Lavia did not expect to see Hikaru inside the carriage. Hikaru immediately told Lavia not to raise her voice as they would be caught escaping. After seeing Lavia's puzzled expression, Hikaru asked her why she was surprised to see him on the way to the capital. Although Hikaru would love to explain the situation, they did not have time for that. Lavia's sadness immediately turned to happiness upon learning that Hikaru really planned to fulfill his promise of becoming her savior. Hikaru was a bit relieved that everything was going according to his plan so far. When it came to rescuing Lavia, Hikaru was particularly concerned about the keys, how many locks there were, and which locks must be broken in order to free Lavia. Hikaru first went to the dungeon in the Count's mansion to inspect the handcuffs that would be put on Lavia. From there, Hikaru saw the master of the Alchemist Guild putting the handcuffs on Lavia. Since the handcuffs would come off by themselves after some time, Hikaru realized that he didn't need a key. After seeing Lavia being put into the carriage, Hikaru continued to observe the others, and learned that only the coachman had the key to unlocking the carriage. Obtaining all of the information he needed, Hikaru then went ahead to the other gate of the city. When the guards were checking the carriage, Hikaru got on top of the roof. Seeing an opportunity, Hikaru borrowed the key from the driver and left the door to the carriage unlocked. After returning the key, Hikaru then entered the carriage when it passed a merchant or something. Hikaru was expecting all kinds of convoy guarding patterns, but in the end he was lucky since all he needed to do was steal the key from the driver. Hikaru then ordered Lavia to arrange the blanket and cushions to make it look like she was sleeping. After giving Lavia a cloak, which was an important part of Hikaru's plan, he needed to make sure that Lavia had the stealth skill. While trying to learn more about the soul board, Hikaru began to wonder how people would normally assign the points they obtained. Since only Hikaru had the ability to see the soul board, he was sure that others would not be able to just assign the points to a specific skill. In Hikaru's theory, the people would just have the points automatically assigned after reaching a certain proficiency. From what Hikaru experienced, he can touch other people's soul boards if he is within a 5-meter distance. Planning to mess with Lavia's soul board, Hikaru wanted Lavia's confirmation that he could do whatever was necessary as long as he got her out. After Lavia agreed to Hikaru's plan, Hikaru then checked Lavia's soul board and was surprised to learn that Lavia spent everything on magic, and even had 11 out of 30 possible magic points. Learning how skilled Lavia was when it came to fire magic, he noticed another skill called magical reasoning and wondered what it was. When Hikaru tried checking the skill's details, he was unable to do so. It made Hikaru think that he might not be able to see the details of someone else's soul board. When Hikaru noticed that Lavia no longer had any points to allocate for stealth, he was not worried, as this was also within Hikaru's expectations. For Hikaru's next plan, Hikaru allocated 1 point to perception blocking, as he had already allocated 1 point each to life blocking and magic blocking. Maxing out the 3 blocking skills, Hikaru was able to use the full effects of the group blocking skill, a skill that allows the user to share a skill if they are touching the user's skin. Now that Hikaru would be able to give Lavia stealth, he was still worried since Lavia couldn't benefit from the blessings of the guild card and could only hope that Nogusa's life detection was not strong enough to detect them. Hikaru then informed Lavia that it was almost time for them to get out of the carriage and that she should prepare herself. Hikaru then informed Lavia of his plan after Lavia requested to know about it so that she would be more prepared. After hearing Hikaru's plan of jumping out of the carriage and hiding behind a tree or bushes, Lavia asked Hikaru about the possibility of them being spotted by the adventurer's lookout. Hikaru did not answer Lavia's question and just told her to not let go of his hand, ever. When the carriage momentarily stopped, both Hikaru and Lavia used stealth to get out of the carriage. Lavia was surprised as she thought that the other adventurers would notice them. After calmly walking out of the carriage, Hikaru was very glad that he had requested a decoy from Kelbeck. When both Hikaru and Lavia were finally in the bushes, Hikaru told Lavia to not let her guard down. Hikaru then informed Lavia that they would be sneaking into a merchant's caravan that was about 2 kilometers from where they were. When Hikaru mentioned that they would be hiding in Pondo, Lavia looked very confused. Hikaru then asked Lavia who she believed would try to help her escape or kidnap her. When Lavia responded that it would be an influential noble that knew about her powers, Hikaru told Lavia that the kingdom would suspect the nobles. Since Pondo is under the jurisdiction of the kingdom, the king has the authority to force an investigation. Hikaru believes that if they overcome their problem with being investigated in Pondo, they will be safe. When Hikaru noticed something from afar, he immediately pulled Lavia down and signaled her to be quiet. Hikaru's heart raced as he saw a knight riding a horse. Judging the knight's physique, Hikaru believed that the man was stronger than the knights in the manor, which made Hikaru more curious about him. Hikaru was now worried that the knight would learn of Lavia's disappearance. Needing to return to Pondo immediately, Hikaru then planned to take a quest from the guild once he returned, to remove any possible suspicion of him being the culprit. Hikaru ordered Lavia to stay hidden as he planned to slow the knight down. With his remaining points, Hikaru allocated them in armed proficiency and raised his throwing level. Hikaru then picked up a rock, planning to hit Lawrence with it. After listening to Asuto's concerns, Lawrence decided to return to the capital, joining the convoy on the way. With his current speed, Lawrence was confident that he could catch up with the convoy shortly. To Lawrence's surprise, the horse he was riding was suddenly struck in the eye. Falling off the horse, Lawrence then drew his sword, announcing his name and status, and warned the perpetrator that they would die for committing such acts against him. Hikaru did not expect that the knight was none other than the captain of the knights himself. Hikaru was still not worried, as he was very confident that Lawrence would not be able to sense him using his stealth. As Hikaru was about to check Lawrence's soul board, he was stopped upon sensing Lawrence's aura even at his distance. Thinking of just going back, Hikaru knew that he still needed to check Lawrence's soul board to know if Lawrence could catch up to the carriage. As Hikaru slowly walked towards Lawrence, he was startled when he saw Lawrence glaring in his direction. However, his worry slowly went away when he realized that Lawrence did not see him. Opening Lawrence's soul board, Hikaru was shocked when he saw Lawrence's abilities. Although Lawrence did not possess the capability of using magic, Hikaru believed that Lawrence did not need magic with just his abilities alone. Having natural recovery and stamina at a high point, Hikaru believed that if he hadn't stopped Lawrence, he would have caught up to the carriage by now. Wondering what he could do to distract Lawrence more, Hikaru was surprised when Lawrence suddenly pointed in Lavia's direction. Hikaru could not believe that Lawrence could sense Lavia's presence from a far distance, and guessed that Lawrence's intuition may have high points. Seeing Lawrence preparing himself to run towards Lavia's location, Hikaru was left with no choice but to try and knock Lawrence out with a rock. To Hikaru's surprise, Lawrence easily blocked Hikaru's sneak attack, slicing the rock Hikaru threw. When Lawrence finally saw Hikaru, he raised his arm and slammed his sword onto the ground. When the smoke finally cleared up, Lawrence realized that he missed his blow and wondered where Hikaru went. Panting very hard, Hikaru was glad that he put points on explosiveness, as he was able to get away from Lawrence in a matter of seconds. Bleeding from his arm, Hikaru now knew that he could not win against a monster like Lawrence. Even though Hikaru was able to avoid instant death due to allocating a point to explosiveness, it was still not enough, as his hand remained injured. Hikaru tried to calm himself down, carefully bandaging the wound to hide the blood. Keeping some distance from Lawrence, Hikaru now wonders what more he could do, as it was clear to him that he could not defeat Lawrence with his current skill. After witnessing how Lawrence cut a pebble that had been thrown from behind, Hikaru then thinks of other ways they might escape. When Hikaru was about to stand up, he stopped as he wondered how Lawrence had noticed the pebble he threw. It also came to Hikaru's mind how Lawrence had noticed the pebble but not him, even though he was just 5 meters away. Hikaru then realized that Lawrence had noticed the pebble because it went beyond the range of his stealth. Hikaru thought of a new plan, however it was a gamble. Seeing something in the bushes, Hikaru was surprised when he saw Lavia. When Hikaru asked why she had gotten closer, Lavia responded that she felt they could not defeat Lawrence and suggested that they escape without going to town. When Lavia noticed Hikaru's arm, Hikaru looked down and realized that the blood on his arm was not stopping. Hikaru was shocked when Lavia suddenly suggested that Hikaru return to the town alone. Lavia reassured Hikaru that she could wait for him for a day or two and that she would be just fine. Hikaru thought that Lavia's suggestion would not work, as Lawrence would likely try to return to Pondo if Hikaru left him be. Hikaru had already anticipated a possibility that Lawrence might take the same road and encounter Hikaru, while both of them were hiding their injuries. Returning back to Pondo, Hikaru guessed that the news of Lavia's disappearance might have already reached the town and spread the word that the suspect was injured. While Lavia was holding his hand, Hikaru noticed that Lavia was also anxious and was trying to push through her anxiety by suggesting that Hikaru withdraw. Since the two of them were prepared to bet everything, Hikaru believed that it was much wiser not to leave their fate to chance. Hikaru told Lavia that he was not going back without her, and that they would continue with the plan of talking down Lawrence. Lavia did not expect that she would also be a part of Hikaru's plan to take down Lawrence. Hikaru asked Lavia if she would help him in defeating Lawrence. Lavia agreed, and when Hikaru asked if she was sure, Lavia told Hikaru that putting herself in danger was nothing after everything Hikaru had done for her. Seeing the slash he had made, Lawrence realized that he had failed to finish the enemy off, but upon seeing the blood, Lawrence deduced that the enemy was still in the area. Sensing something in the tall grass, Lawrence immediately checked it out and saw footprints. Following the footprints, he was led to the road again, making him think that his enemies had crossed the road. However, he had kept an eye on the road and was sure that no one had passed by. Sensing something again in the grass, Lawrence wondered if it was just an animal, as nothing seemed to have changed. Since his attacker was no longer making a move, Lawrence believed that his enemies had escaped. Deciding not to pursue his attacker as he did not have much time to waste, Lawrence then prepared himself to follow the carriage on foot. Lawrence felt something behind him, and when he turned around he saw a magic circle. Assessing the large magic circle, Lawrence believed that the magic was at a level where even the top wizard in the royal palace might not be able to use it. While checking the surrounding area for the magic circle's caster, Lawrence spotted Lavia's hand in the tall grass and planned to reach the wizard before the magic could be activated. However, before Lawrence could make his move, he sensed someone near him. Unfortunately for Lawrence, it was too late to react to Hikaru's presence as he received a serious injury to his neck. Hikaru then advised Lawrence not to move if he wished to avoid bleeding to death. Hikaru was confident that Lawrence would not die from his attack, as he was not just an ordinary person. When Lawrence asked Hikaru's name, Hikaru responded that he was called Silverface. After seeing his enemy walk away, Lawrence looked up and noticed that the magic circle had disappeared. Realizing that he would have died if the magic had been activated, Lawrence became furious, unable to believe his life had been spared. Both Hikaru and Lavia successfully returned to the village, thanks to a group of merchants they encountered. When Lavia asked Hikaru about his wound, Hikaru reassured her that he was fine, explaining that he had taken some potions the merchants were carrying. Once the magic of the handcuffs vanished, Lavia was freed from her restraints. Upon arriving at an inn, Hikaru instructed Lavia to stay hidden in the room as he still had something to take care of. Returning to the guild, Hikaru asked Fleury if there were any requests he could take on for the day. While going through the job requests, Fleury noticed that Hikaru looked a little pale and pointed it out. Nervous, Hikaru responded that he had not gotten much sleep. Fleury, confused, reminded him that he had gone home after their dinner. When Hikaru claimed he had gone out drinking again, Fleury was slightly annoyed and remarked that she had held back on her drinking during dinner. To make amends, Hikaru invited her to drink together another time. While reviewing the requests, Fleury couldn't find a job she believed suited Hikaru. She told him she would save the right request for him once she found it. After leaving the guild, Hikaru felt relieved, knowing he had successfully established a solid alibi. When Hikaru returned to the inn, Lavia suddenly jumped on him. She apologized and explained that she had been afraid Hikaru would disappear. After Hikaru reassured her that he was done tying up loose ends, Lavia became curious and asked if her sound would also disappear if she held his hand. When Hikaru confirmed that sound would vanish too, Lavia promised to do her best to keep her voice down before kissing him. She then reminded Hikaru of her promise to give everything to him. Flustered at first, Hikaru became serious and asked Lavia if she wasn't afraid of him. Reflecting on his actions during their escape, Hikaru admitted that he was not a respectable person. Lavia, although agreeing with Hikaru's self-assessment, stated that she did not care because she had already vowed to give him everything if he saved her. She made it clear that she did not care about Hikaru's character or past, as she would not go back on her word. Hikaru realized that Lavia had fully accepted him, flaws and all. Lavia, feeling nervous because she had never been intimate with anyone before, spent the night with Hikaru. As Lavia slept beside him, Hikaru reflected on how she had offered him everything she had and had fully accepted him. Hikaru resolved that it was now his turn to repay Lavia. For Lavia, the mansion was her whole world. A dark world where she was not permitted to go outside, simply waiting to be used as a weapon. From that world, Lavia met Hikaru, who rescued her and granted her freedom. Lavia knew that Hikaru was hiding something important, but Lavia did not care at all since Hikaru was the one who saved her life and the first person to capture her heart. When Lavia finally woke up, she felt embarrassed because the first thing she saw was Hikaru staring at her. Lavia immediately covered herself with the blanket after Hikaru mentioned that she looked adorable while sleeping. As Hikaru apologized for what had happened the previous day, Lavia could not look him straight in the eyes, as she was too embarrassed. Lavia then told Hikaru that since it was her first time leaving the mansion, she felt as though her body was in pieces. However, Lavia also mentioned that her heart was filled with happiness as well. While staring at Lavia, Hikaru wondered how long it had been since he had felt the warmth of another person beside him. Hikaru's parents were distant, and it was also hard for him to make friends. Turning serious, Hikaru thought that Lavia might be wondering how he made himself disappear, or rather, how he hid himself from others. Lavia gasped after Hikaru mentioned that he operated a little outside of the rules of their world. Lavia tried to tell Hikaru that he did not need to force himself to share his secret. Hikaru responded that it was his secret, and he believed that he would also have to tell Lavia about it eventually. When Hikaru asked Lavia if she would like to hear about his power and himself, Lavia let go of the blanket, changed her expression, and responded yes to Hikaru. Holding Lavia's hand, Hikaru reassured her that he would do everything to protect her no matter what, and only asked Lavia to walk alongside him. Lavia then smiled as she agreed to Hikaru's request. Staring at Lavia, Hikaru knew that waiting was not enough, and that he would have to take the initiative in order to find someone he could truly trust. Returning to the guild, Hikaru was then greeted by Fluer. Hikaru then informed Fluer that the reason for his visit to the guild was to return Unken's book. Upon seeing the book, Fluer immediately recognized that it was an old edition. Hikaru explained that he had already expected that he couldn't get the latest edition. In reality, Hikaru had already finished reading the latest edition, and was just returning an old edition to create an alibi. Hikaru had read the latest edition so many times that he had already memorized its contents. Fluer was very impressed with Hikaru's hunger for knowledge, going out of his way to even borrow materials. When Hikaru asked if Unken was available, Fluer responded that Unken was currently away, and offered to return the book for him. Hikaru then asked Fluer what kind of person could become a guildmaster. Fluer responded that her information was just second-hand, and informed Hikaru that guildmasters were usually appointed from experienced adventurers. From what Fluer heard, Unken was not an adventurer, and had instead been working for a more public institution. Fluer shared rumors that after Unken finished a major job at the public institution, Unken then retired from there and started working at the guild. As Hikaru wondered what type of work Unken had done in the institution, Fluer whispered as she guessed that Unken might have been a spy under the supervision of the king, or an assassin. When Hikaru asked Fluer how she came up with such a theory, Fluer explained that Unken arrived at the guild 50 years ago. Unken's arrival at the guild coincided with the year that the king of the neighboring kingdom, Quinbrand, was assassinated. The king of Quinbrand, Emperor Balzard, had previously declared that he would invade and destroy the kingdom of Ponsonia. At that time, the kingdom of Ponsonia was suffering from an epidemic, which had led to a decline in national power. Fluer was sure that Ponsonia was the only kingdom that wanted to assassinate the evil king badly. Another clue Fluer noticed was when she delivered some materials to Unken's room and accidentally saw a letter on the desk from the king of Ponsonia himself. If Fluer's assumptions were correct, Hikaru then thought that Unken might be the kingdom's hero. Remembering Unken's soul board, Hikaru assessed that all the skills were geared toward assassination, which made Hikaru believe that Fluer might not be entirely wrong. Doubtful of Hikaru finishing the book, Fluer started a quiz to test him. As Hikaru answered Fluer's questions, Pauline suddenly interfered and answered the question that was meant for Hikaru. When Pauline was later dragged away by Pia, Hikaru looked pleased, knowing that Pauline and the others were doing well. When Hikaru asked about the issue revolving around Pauline's party and the other party that had tried to offer them to the goblins, Fluer responded that the accused adventurers were currently missing. Hikaru wondered if those adventurers planned on hiding somewhere until things cooled down. Content with Hikaru proving himself, Fluer then suggested to Hikaru that he read the latest edition, and not the old one. When Hikaru returned home, he looked very pleased when Lavia had changed into a much nicer outfit. Receiving the nice outfit, Lavia became curious as to how Hikaru was so good at choosing clothes for girls. Hikaru tried to defend himself by explaining that he had just thought of Lavia while searching for clothes. When Hikaru mentioned that he had been thinking of Lavia all day, Lavia felt embarrassed and then guilty, asking Hikaru if the clothes were expensive. With the money Hikaru gained from the Red Horn Rabbit, he was not afraid to spend a bit of money on clothes. Hikaru had also bought a contraceptive in case he needed it in the future. As the two agreed to buy necessities for their journey, Hikaru noticed Lavia's worried expression and reassured her that she could now go and decide whatever she wanted. With life in her eyes, Lavia told Hikaru that she wanted to go on an adventure, which Hikaru had already expected from her. After being asked by Hikaru about her condition, Lavia responded that although some parts of her body hurt, she was now feeling much better. In order to repay Hikaru's kindness, Lavia thought that Hikaru deserved for them to lay with each other later. Embarrassed, Hikaru told Lavia that it was not necessary. The rejection made Lavia think that she was not attractive, which then confused Hikaru's state of mind. As the two held hands and lay on the bed, Hikaru then realized that the gem he had bought might already be used from the very first day. Fleury greeted Aurora with a good morning and was then told by Aurora that Unken was looking for her. When Fleury met with Unken, the guildmaster informed Fleury that he needed to confirm something with her. Unken then shared with Fleury the news of the failed mission in escorting a suspect. Surprised, Fleury asked if the adventurers had been attacked by bandits on the highway, or faced a vicious monster. After sharing with Unken a possible theory based on Nogusa's character, Unken thought that it was possible at first. However, after hearing Nogusa's explanation and checking the carriage for himself, Unken assessed that the suspect seemed to have vanished into thin air. Since the suspect vanished, Fleury pointed out that Nogusa and the others would be the primary suspects, which Unken agreed with. However, Unken was a bit conflicted since Nogusa personally showed up at the Royal Capital Guild and gave an absurd statement. Unken then mentioned two things that made their situation more complicated. The first was the coachman's statement, where he mentioned that Nogusa demanded the keys to the carriage. Unken guessed that Nogusa might have been interested in the suspect. Unken believed that the Royal Capital's guild would plummet after the failed mission. When Fleury asked about the other reason that made the situation more complicated, Unken shared that Lawrence had pursued the carriage to join the escort but was attacked by bandits and was unable to catch up to the carriage. Fleury was surprised when she heard that the knight was none other than Lawrence, the knight commander. Both Fleury and Unken could not believe that someone like Lawrence could be defeated. However, they could not refute it when Lawrence himself testified. What surprised Fleury even more was the fact that Lawrence was defeated by a child who called himself Silverface. Thinking about Nogusa's party's testimony, Fleury thought that Lawrence might have faced a person who is naturally gifted in combat. Although the theory was possible, Unken was having a hard time believing that a child could defeat the Sword Saint. After being told by Unken that Aurora and she had the same theory, Fleury was then asked if there were any skilled young men around, regardless of whether they were adventurers or not. The question made Fleury think of Hikaru at first, but she did not mention Hikaru's name, assuming that he had been reading materials the day before yesterday. After being told by Fleury that she could not think of anyone, Unken was a bit disappointed and planned to ask Gloria afterward, although Unken could already guess that he would receive the same answer. Meanwhile, Lavia's eyes were glowing after seeing the town for the first time. Hikaru told Lavia the shop names one by one as they passed through them. When Hikaru pointed to the Adventurers Guild, he looked confused when he saw Lavia suddenly crying. Lavia had always dreamed of visiting the Adventurers Guild and was very glad to be alive to see it. Hikaru then suggested that they go inside so that they could gather more information. Lavia became excited when Hikaru told her that she could enter in a few days. Lavia then told Hikaru that she smelled something delicious, which Hikaru informed her was coming from the bakery. Since it was almost lunchtime, Hikaru then suggested that they buy something to eat first. While eating their lunch, Hikaru shared that he had plans later in the afternoon, and Hikaru suggested that they go outside of town. Lavia's eyes glowed with the thought that they would be going on an adventure. Hikaru then clarified that they would be preparing themselves for the adventure. Wanting to check how powerful Lavia's powers were, the two then went to an open field outside of town. When they finally arrived at the top of the hill, Lavia was amazed by the view and asked Hikaru how far the grassland she was seeing stretched. After being told that it would take a day by horse to cross, Lavia became more excited. Before Lavia could use her magic, Hikaru asked if he could see her soul card. Checking Lavia's soul card, Hikaru noticed that Lavia no longer had a last name. When Lavia asked Hikaru why he wanted to see her card, Hikaru explained that he wanted to know what blessings Lavia had. Noticing the secret rite on Lavia's card, Hikaru asked her about it. Lavia then explained the sacred rite by writing it on the ground. Of all the powerful skills Lavia wrote down, she was surprised when Hikaru was more curious about the skill called Magic Principle. Lavia could not provide much explanation about the skill, as her magic had just developed on its own. Before Lavia could explain more about her magic developing on its own, she asked Hikaru to watch her magic first. After casting the spell Fire Breath, the most basic type of magic, Hikaru was in total disbelief that the spell was basic when it had so much power. Lavia was relieved after Hikaru told her that he was not afraid of her, as she had assumed that Hikaru would leave her after witnessing her power for himself. Comforting Lavia, Hikaru then promised that he would not leave her. Hikaru then noticed someone coming, and assumed that Lavia's spell had drawn attention. To avoid more attention, Hikaru suggested that they move to a different location. When Hikaru asked Lavia how many times she could cast the spell, he was impressed when Lavia told him that she could use the spell 30 more times without a break. Hikaru became excited and wondered if he could also use magic. When Hikaru tried casting the same spell, he expected to see fire coming out of his hand. However, nothing happened. Lavia believed that Hikaru needed to first deepen his relationship with the spirits and practice releasing magical energy before doing anything. For Lavia, it was when she was 6 years old that her aptitude for magic was first discovered. When Lavia was about to be stomped by an incoming horse, she became frightened and released her magical power, which caused everyone to fall asleep. When Count Morks heard of the incident, he then met with Lavia and guided her to a room. Lavia became scared upon seeing many monsters tied down in the room. Count Morks then started testing Lavia's abilities, and the experiment revealed that Lavia had a great affinity for fire magic. Count Morks was overjoyed when he realized that Lavia could be of use to him. However, he was also scared, which led to Lavia's isolation and her being forbidden to leave the mansion. Lavia later heard that the king had been informed about her. Listening to Lavia, Hikaru realized that she had faced so many hardships simply because she was being used as a tool of war. Hikaru thanked Lavia for sharing her past, knowing that sharing something so personal must have been difficult. Learning more about Lavia's fire magic, Hikaru asked her how much she could control. After witnessing her magic for himself, Hikaru believed that the spell was far too powerful for a beginner. Lavia admitted she was not sure about controlling the size and power of the magic but informed Hikaru that she could adjust the location where the magic appeared and the direction it flew. Hikaru became more intrigued by magic, wondering if Lavia could change the fire's shapes. Since Lavia had never tried manipulating her magic in that way, Hikaru suggested they try it out. Realizing that the location was too conspicuous for such tests, Hikaru told Lavia they would have to do it some other time. After praising Hikaru for sounding like a scholar, Lavia was asked by Hikaru if she had always had such immense magic power. Lavia revealed that she had less magic power at first. Hikaru guessed that Lavia's points might have been allocated automatically when she told him she had not done any special training to increase her magical power. Lavia became amused watching Hikaru grow more focused on the mechanics of abilities and how they are allocated. As they headed back home, Hikaru hoped that he could live happily in his new life together with Lavia. Meanwhile, in a village named Manelka, a pastor approached two men praising them for their hard work. The two men shared that Manelka's dried tomatoes were well known and that their efforts would surely pay off. When one of the men mentioned that Pauline was excellent at peeling tomatoes, he immediately covered his mouth and apologized to the pastor. The pastor reassured the man that he was not mad, agreeing that Pauline was indeed excellent at her job. The pastor then told the two men that their work for the day was done and encouraged them to do their best tomorrow. All of a sudden, everyone was surprised when the entire village trembled. One of the men wondered if what they had experienced was an earthquake, but the pastor believed it was not. The sudden shock gave the pastor an ominous feeling that something bad was about to happen. Back at the restaurant, the owner trembled as he asked Hikaru if what he was holding was the entrails of a red-horned rabbit. After Hikaru confirmed it, the owner then slapped Hikaru's back, praising him for doing a good job. Seeing the owner so happy after receiving the red-horned rabbit's entrails, Hikaru thought that the owner was a very strange person. Watching the sunset, Hikaru was pleased with what he had accomplished throughout the day. Although Hikaru wanted to go to the guild to make the delivery with Lavia, he believed that it was still too risky to take Lavia with him. Hikaru's new plan was to quickly raise Lavia's rank and see if she could acquire the stealth ability. Arriving at the guild, Hikaru first noticed that Fluere was very busy. Hikaru then went to Gloria, who was trying to get his attention. After handing over a red-horned rabbit for appraisal, Hikaru then received his reward. Impressed with Hikaru's skills in catching rare monsters like the red-horned rabbit, Gloria believed that if Hikaru continued at this pace, he would raise his adventurer rank in no time. Happy to be praised by Gloria, Hikaru's expression immediately changed, looking very puzzled when Gloria asked about his whereabouts the day before yesterday. As the atmosphere grew too tense, Fluere intervened, sharing that Hikaru had been studying the day before yesterday. Also surprised by Fluere's appearance, Hikaru quickly followed up on what Fluere mentioned, informing Gloria that he had been studying some basic knowledge crucial to adventurers. Nervous, Hikaru thought to himself about how he couldn't react immediately because Gloria had suddenly asked such a question. Hikaru then wondered why Gloria had asked him that specific question, making him think that Gloria was convinced he had played a part in rescuing Lavia. After confirming that Hikaru was free later, Fluere then asked Hikaru to meet her outside after half an hour. Gloria called for Hikaru once more, confirming whether the blessing available on his guild card was Widespread Civilian Relief God Civilian. Hikaru confirmed that it was his only blessing, pointing out to Gloria that he was just a novice adventurer who could not complete requests properly. Before leaving, Hikaru was reminded by Gloria to take care of Fluere, as she did not drink a lot of alcohol. After some time, Hikaru and Fluere were walking down the street. When Fluere brought up the topic of Count Mork's death, Hikaru appeared curious and asked if there had been any progress. Fluere informed him that the soldier in question was Lawrence, who had been about to catch up with the escort when he was suddenly attacked and injured by a bandit. Hikaru was relieved to learn that Lawrence had not died, although Lawrence had still received a serious injury. Fluere wondered if the disappearance of the Count's daughter and the attack on Lawrence were related. Hikaru then shared his opinion with Fluere, explaining how he thought that the two matters might just be unrelated when considered logically. Based on what Hikaru and Fluere talked about, Hikaru guesses that Gloria also knows everything, which is why she called Hikaru out. When Hikaru learned that the guild is no longer planning to look for the culprit, he then asked Fluere if the guild's request was a failure, which Fluere also confirmed. Fluere then shared how Unken looked very gloomy with the guild's failure. Fluere then told Hikaru that she would now be going inside her home before pointing to a bakery shop. Fluere then revealed that they owned the bakery and advised Hikaru to visit as their bread is known to be very delicious. Fluere was shocked when Hikaru told her that he had already bought some bread earlier at the same shop. Receiving praise for her shop, Fluere thanked Hikaru and told him that he could invite her to dinner anytime. Hikaru, who was not able to hear Fluere properly, asked Fluere what she had just said. Embarrassed, Fluere told Hikaru that it was nothing and hurriedly went inside. Confused about what Fluere said, Hikaru then realigned his focus on gathering information about Lavia's situation while also keeping a low profile. The next day, Pauline and the others were at the Adventurers Guild, talking about forming a new party with just the three of them. Pauline was worried as she believed that a party of three might be too underpowered. Pia then pointed out to Pauline that a party with just the three of them was much better than adding people they could not trust. While the three were talking about Hikaru and the plan to invite him to their party, their conversation was suddenly interrupted when an injured man walked inside the guild. Staring at the man more closely, Pauline and Pia recognized him as Pippin from their village. When Pauline asked Pippin if he was alright, Pippin reassured her that he was just fine before telling her that he needed to report the situation to the Adventurers Guild. In front of the guildmaster, Unken, Pippin shared the incident that happened yesterday. Pippin was told by a group of battered adventurers that more monsters were appearing in the dungeon of the Forest of Deception and were believed to be overflowing. Since the dungeon was not that far from the village, Pippin was tasked by their village chief to inform the guild of the situation, while another villager was tasked to do the same but headed to Rezaelka. When Unken asked Pippin about the status of the adventurers he had mentioned earlier, Pippin informed him that the battered adventurers were now dead. Pippin then remembered something that the adventurers mentioned, informing Unken that the monsters coming out of the Forest of Deception were commonly found in the middle levels. Confused, Pippin asked what the middle level was. Unken explained to Pippin how there are two types of dungeons. The first type of dungeon includes natural caves and ruins, while the other type is a structure created by the dungeon master. Unken further explained how the dungeon master is a monster with an unknown ecology. Dungeon masters generate dungeons like an ant nest and spawn pseudo-monsters. After explaining to Pippin more about dungeons, Unken remembered that adventurers have only reached up to the 5th level, and theorized that there might be more levels below the 5th floor. Unken then tasked Fluere to check the types of monsters that appear in the middle levels. For rank E subjugations, the monsters that are recommended are the Lesser Basilisk and Woody Bat. For the rank D subjugation, the recommended monsters are the Lost Man and Evil Eye. For the C-ranked monsters, both the Executioner and Lesser Wyvern may likely appear. After informing Aurora that there have been records of monsters overflowing from dungeons, Unken also shared that the reason why many adventurers discover dungeons is that monsters sometimes escape from dungeons and encounter humans. Unken advises Pippin to rest as the Capital Guild will have to decide their next course of action. The next day at the royal capital, Lawrence was by himself, focused on his training. Upon hearing a familiar voice, Lawrence immediately dropped his weapon and knelt in front of the mysterious person. It was then revealed that the person was the princess, Cujastoria. After confirming that Lawrence was doing well, Cujastoria then asked her guards to leave them alone. The princess's guards were hesitant at first, but after reassuring them she would be fine with Lawrence beside her, the guards then agreed. When Lawrence asked the princess if she needed something from him, the princess shared the information they had received and asked Lawrence if he had heard of the Forest of Deception. Lawrence overheard the news that the dungeon was overflowing, and he then asked if the army had been dispatched. Cujastoria then informed Lawrence that the king had decided to abandon the dungeon, after being told that the nearby village would be evacuated and that the Adventurers Guild would not be dealing with the problem. Lawrence deduced that the king was planning to go to war with the Quinbrand Empire, which the princess also confirmed. Seeing the princess worried about his state, Lawrence reassured her that his wound had already healed. Cujastoria then shared with Lawrence the things she had noticed about her father's actions. From coveting Count Mork's daughter to abandoning his people so easily, Cujastoria wondered if the war with the Empire would really brighten their kingdom and future. When Unken learned of the king's actions, he could not hold back and insulted the king. Gloria then tried to calm Unken down, informing him that Pippin was still waiting for him on the 1st floor. Meeting Pippin outside, Unken shared the news that the army would not be mobilized. Pippin could not believe it after being told that the guild was also not allowed to help, and that the village was instructed to evacuate to Pondo. Pia became enraged by the news Unken shared, revealing to Unken that she and her party were from the same village. When Pia pointed out how it was the army's job to help in times of crisis, Unken only responded that he couldn't answer her. Unable to hold her anger, Pia was about to hit Unken when the others immediately held her back to prevent her from making a scene. Realizing that the others also had a point, Pia decided that she would just kill the monsters herself. Fluere interrupted Pia, informing her that only rank E and higher are recommended to enter the dungeon. Pia made it clear that she would not be entering the dungeon, as she only wanted to protect her village. After confirming that others also shared the same thought as her, Pia, Pauline, and Priscilla left the guild and were now headed to the village. Worried for the girls, Fluere asked Unken to say something. However, Unken pointed out to Fluere that the girls were not violating any rules and that he would rather focus on the special requests they had. Gloria then mentioned that she had already organized the request into a subjugation request that is limited to D and E ranks, and an escort request for ranks F and G. Hearing about the special request, Fluere smiled as she realized that Unken had not abandoned the village. Looking through the guild's budget, Unken could only afford 5 adventurers for the subjugation requests, and 10 for the escort requests. Gloria then suggested using the Royal Capital's guild budget, but Unken told her not to get her hopes up with the Capital Guild. Unken then asked the adventurers who were present in the guild if any of them were willing to go. Meanwhile, at the Royal Capital Guild, some adventurers had already heard about the news regarding the Forest of Deception, which led them to think that there might be requests related to it. However, they were surprised to learn that there weren't any. An adventurer then pointed out that the 4 Eastern Stars had returned. Solus, Sophie, Sala, and Sarika had finally returned to the Adventurers Guild after completing a request. Noticing the large number of people in the guild, Solus asked the receptionist if something had happened. After being told about the situation in the Forest of Deception, Solus then told Sala that they would have to head to the dungeon right away. However, Solus was then informed by the receptionist that the kingdom had instructed the guild not to deploy adventurers ranked C or above. Understanding the situation, Solus thanked the receptionist for providing them with valuable information. As the 4 Eastern Stars left the guild, Sala then asked Solus what they would be doing. Solus informed the 3 that although the kingdom did not want them to take action, she pointed out that she had not received any orders to refrain from acting. The 4 Eastern Stars then decided to head out to the village of Manelka. After taking down a monster, Hikaru then checked Lavia's soul board and was impressed with its improvement. With Lavia's pace, Hikaru then informed her that she might be able to hit her target by 11. Hikaru was mainly making money by delivering black moon grass, which is known to be helpful with kidney diseases. When Lavia asked if Hikaru would be delivering it to the guild, Hikaru responded that he would not. Later that day, Hikaru then visited the Thieves Guild and met with Kelbeck. Since Hikaru brought his collections to the Thieves Guild hideout, Kelbeck asked him if he had some kind of shady reason. When Hikaru responded that he just did not want to stand out, it only made Kelbeck more confused. Not expecting to learn that black moongrass is good for kidneys, Kelbeck asked Hikaru where he learned such information. Hikaru then simply told Kelbeck that he learned it from a friend who was knowledgeable about magic and medicinal herbs. When Hikaru mentioned that his friend had passed away, Kelbeck became suspicious, as he thought that Hikaru did not have any friends since Hikaru always wandered around alone. Kelbeck changed the topic and asked Hikaru if the actor he lent did a good job. When Hikaru responded yes, Kelbeck then mentioned how he had heard something interesting. Kelbeck learned that a count's daughter was inside the carriage and coincidentally disappeared. While Kelbeck continued to point out how the suspect suddenly vanished into thin air, Hikaru's expression became more serious. The incident about the missing suspect made Kelbeck remember a certain someone who had managed to enter his room undetected, prompting him to ask Hikaru if it was just a coincidence. Kelbeck's smug look turned to shock when he saw Hikaru's murderous expression, nervously asking him what he was trying to imply. Kelbeck then asked Hikaru to calm down, saying that what he mentioned was a joke. However, Hikaru made it clear that he did not like jokes that weren't funny. In the end, Kelbeck apologized to Hikaru, who was also a client of his. Hikaru then tried to re-establish their relationship, informing Kelbeck how they could do good business as long as they had an understanding as client and proprietor. Agreeing with Hikaru, Kelbeck decided to sell him some magic items. After placing multiple items on the table, Kelbeck explained to Hikaru what the items were and their individual uses. Taking an item, Hikaru believed that it would be useful for him in the future. 2 days later at the Adventurers Guild, Hikaru was then informed by Fluere about the Forest of Deception overflowing with monsters. Fluere then warned Hikaru not to go into the dungeon since Hikaru was only a G rank, and the dungeon only allowed D rank and higher. Hikaru then asked if the kingdom really planned on abandoning the Forest of Deception. The Forest of Deception was known to be an artificial dungeon created by a dungeon master. Hikaru believed that the dungeon would yield a handsome profit. While Fleur agreed with what Hikaru was saying, she was somewhat hesitant in commenting and answering Hikaru's questions. With Hikaru continuing with his theory, Fleur became nervous when Hikaru wondered if the kingdom was going to start a war or something. Seeing Fleur's reaction, Hikaru decided to stop speculating and instead asked her if Pauline and her friends had already left for Manelka. After Fleur confirmed Hikaru's question, Hikaru then left the guild and returned to the inn. Turning around, Hikaru then asked Lavia, who was slowly removing the stealth skill, if she had been listening. Lavia had gained 5 points from leveling up, and all of them were used to unlock agility and stealth, while the rest were used for perception concealment. Amazed that no one really noticed her, Lavia then asked Hikaru if he knew where she was even with stealth being activated. Hikaru responded that he did since he had allocated 1 point to both life detection and magic detection. When Hikaru asked Lavia about her opinion of the Forest of Deception, he was puzzled since Lavia looked depressed. Lavia then asked Hikaru what he wanted to do, and if he really wanted to help Pauline. Thinking about Pauline potentially dying because of the dungeon overflowing, Hikaru commented on how it would leave a bad taste in his mouth. After listening to Hikaru, Lavia wondered if Hikaru liked Pauline. The panicked Lavia became embarrassed when Hikaru told her that he did not have an intimate relationship with Pauline. After reassuring Lavia that he only had feelings for her, Hikaru then thought about how it was impossible for him to fall for Pauline, who only lusted after him. The next day, Fleur became worried when she realized she had not seen Hikaru since morning. Noticing Fleure's worried expression, Gloria asked her if she was being troubled by something. Gloria then asked Fleur if she had heard about what happened at the Royal Capital Guild. Seeing Fleure's clueless look, Gloria whispered into Fleure's ear about what had happened. Shocked, Fleur asked Gloria if what she had told her was true. After responding that it was, Gloria said she believed it would definitely get things moving. As Hikaru and Lavia were riding a horse heading to Manelka, Hikaru believed that they would be able to catch up with Pauline and the others at their current pace. Seeing smoke in the distance, Lavia pointed it out to Hikaru, which also surprised the driver, who wondered what was happening. Recognizing the familiar faces, Hikaru informed Lavia that they must move immediately, stepping off the horse and continuing on foot. Meanwhile, inside the burning house, Pia and the others were trapped by the adventurers who had tried to feed them to goblins before. As Pauline mentioned that she was about to reach her limit, Pia suggested to Priscilla that they take down as many enemies as they could. However, Priscilla asked them to wait and pointed out how they would face the same result regardless of whether they went out now or later. Priscilla then suggested that they wait until the wall collapsed and shoot through it at that time. Although Pia and Pauline were hesitant to follow the plan, they could not refute Priscilla's logic. Out of nowhere, the three heard a familiar voice informing them that there was a much better way. The three were shocked when Hikaru suddenly appeared beside them, informing them that if they went out through the east window, there would be no one there. Pauline, who was speechless at first, finally spoke and asked Hikaru what he was doing inside the house. Hikaru responded that he would explain later, and instructed the three that they had better hurry, as the cabin was about to collapse. Seeing the roof of the cabin collapsing from the outside, Hikaru was relieved and suggested that they get out quickly. When they were about to leave, Pia protested, saying she did not want to be looked down upon and let their enemies get away after almost killing them. When the male adventurers heard Pia's voice, they informed the others that the women were running away. As Pia was already readying herself to fight their enemies, both she and Hikaru were surprised when someone showed up and stopped the male adventurers. When asked if they were the ones who had attacked the cabin, the male adventurer was shocked and demanded to know why the woman was in front of him. Introducing herself as Selous Land, a member of the 4 Eastern Stars, Selous said she could not ignore how the man had tried to burn down a cabin and attack the people inside. Selous then told the man that she would be taking him into custody. After the criminals were subdued, Pauline then asked Selous if they were heading to Manelka. Selous responded that she was, since she heard of the matters revolving around the Forest of Deception from the Adventurers Guild. Since there was no official quest about the overflowing dungeon, Selous could not bear the thought of ignoring it. Hikaru thought that Selous must be very confident in her abilities, after hearing that they would be heading to Manelka to help people. While Hikaru was staring at them seriously, Selous then asked about Hikaru since he was also a man. Hikaru tried lying by informing Selous that he was just a passerby. However, Pauline's excitement spoiled his plan as Pauline mentioned his name. Hikaru shared that he was thinking of heading to Manelka as well, and asked Selous if they ran into an old man on a fast horse. Selous confirmed that they did, and shared that they heard about the incident from the old man himself. Hikaru was glad that Lavia didn't have to use her magic, as she would have exposed herself. The 4 Eastern Stars party was originally assigned to transport Lavia, which made Hikaru think that the party heard of Lavia's appearance from the guild. When Hikaru checked Soluce's soulboard, he immediately could tell that Soluce was much stronger than Nagusa. Soluce's weapon proficiency for swords is 5, while Lawrence, who is known as the Sword Saint, has 6 for great swords. Hikaru already expected that B-rank adventurers would be much stronger than Nagusa. When Hikaru asked Soluce about the rest of her party, Soluce explained that everyone except her was patrolling the vicinity. Hikaru thought that if he was facing 4 B-rank adventurers like Soluce, he would be in more trouble than when he fought Lawrence. Pauline became excited upon hearing that Hikaru would also be going to Manelka. Calming Pauline, Hikaru explained that his decision was just on a whim. Soluce then confronted Hikaru, telling Hikaru how confident he was in going to a place filled with monsters on a whim. Sensing the atmosphere was getting intense between Hikaru and Soluce, Pia stepped in the middle, sharing how she felt reassured that the 4 Eastern Stars were with them. Pia then insisted that Soluce and the others stay at their place in Manelka, since their house was big due to her father being the village chief. Pauline tried to offer her home to Hikaru, however he instantly refused. Hikaru explained that he planned on heading to Manelka separately, and mentioned that the old man on the fast horse would also come back. Both Soluce and Pauline insisted that they stick together. However, Hikaru was not easily persuaded, as he just responded that he gets nervous when he is surrounded by women. After Hikaru left, Soluce, along with Pia and the others, then rode a horse as they headed their way to Manelka. When the villagers saw adventurers, they immediately informed everyone by shouting. Seeing the villagers' reaction, Pia felt embarrassed and apologized to Soluce. When Soluce mentioned that she did not mind and even told Pia that it was a natural reaction and something not to be embarrassed about, Pia's eyes gleamed with admiration. Meanwhile, Pauline stared at Soluce with disdain, believing that Hikaru was the one who had truly saved them. Pauline was surprised when someone told her that there was no need for her to look gloomy, as they had visited the village with the intention to help. When Pauline turned around, she saw the rest of the 4 Eastern Stars party. After seeing Sophie up close, Pauline felt a pang of pain when she noticed the difference between herself and Sophie. When Pauline noticed Sarika, she wondered what kind of person Sarika might be. A man then approached Sophie, which surprised Pauline when she realized that it was her father. Surprised to see Pauline, the priest then ordered her to show Sophie around the village first before they spoke. Pauline thought that she would be scolded for becoming an adventurer without informing anyone, but thanks to Sophie's presence, Pauline's worry might just be brushed aside. When night came, Hikaru and Lavia talked about the 4 Eastern Stars. Hikaru was not sure what he felt about the B-rank party, but he was certain that he wouldn't let his guard down around them. Hikaru shared that the 4 Eastern Stars were on a different level than the average adventurer. When Hikaru started sharing what he had noticed about Soluce, he was confused when he saw Lavia sulking. When Hikaru asked if something was wrong, Lavia responded that it was nothing, which made Hikaru worry even more. Hikaru then pointed out that they needed to talk to each other so that they wouldn't have any problems. Embarrassed, Lavia shared that she felt short of breath and that her chest felt heavy when she heard Hikaru praising another woman. When Hikaru asked if she was jealous, Lavia honestly answered that she was, admitting that she felt like a terrible woman for thinking that way and didn't want to be like that. Hikaru then told Lavia that the reason he avoided going into the village was so that he could spend time alone with her. Lavia asked Hikaru if he was disappointed in her for being so pathetically jealous. However, Hikaru pointed out that he was not disappointed but rather happy, since he had never had anyone care for him like that before. Placing his arm around Lavia's shoulder, both Hikaru and Lavia spent a warm night together under the stars. When morning came, Pia tried to calm the villagers, who were eager to know the adventurers' plans. Pia calmly explained that the 4 Eastern Stars wanted to discuss the matter privately with the village chief. Hikaru and Lavia took the opportunity to sneak into the village chief's home while Pia and the villagers were on the verge of starting a heated argument. When Hikaru finally reached a room where he heard voices, he overheard the village chief talking to the 4 Eastern Stars. The village chief expressed his expectation that the adventurers would clear out the dungeon. However, Soluce responded that what the chief was asking of them was quite a big task for only the 4 of them. Soluce pointed out that there's no map of the deeper parts of the Forest of Deception, which makes the raid difficult and filled with many uncertainties. Confused, the village chief asked about the purpose of the 4 Eastern Stars' visit. Soluce explained that they would only buy time for the village to evacuate to a nearby town. The village chief refused the idea of leaving the village, as their whole livelihood depended on it. While Soluce was explaining to the village chief that the dungeon would eventually be dealt with, Sala suddenly sensed that someone was eavesdropping outside. However, she dismissed the thought, assuming it might just be her imagination when she saw no one. Hiding behind the door, Hikaru was glad that he had left it slightly ajar. With Hikaru's stealth skills, he believed they might remain undetected if they stayed in the hall longer. However, Hikaru did not want to take such a gamble against a B-rank opponent. After checking Sala's soulboard, Hikaru was surprised to see that Sala's instinct had 5 points. People with high instinct cannot see through stealth but can still sense someone's presence. Hikaru was even more surprised when he heard a voice mentioning that someone might be hiding in the other room. When Hikaru checked the soul board again, he was shocked to discover Sarika's abilities. Following Sarika's order to check the room, Solus and Sarika entered. Noticing the open window, Solus assumed that whoever had been eavesdropping must have already escaped. However, Sarika remained unsatisfied with not knowing the identity of the eavesdropper. Later that day, both Hikaru and Lavia were sitting on a bench outside. Lavia still could not get over the experience as she thought they had been moments away from being discovered. Noticing Hikaru's troubled expression, Lavia asked him what the problem was. When Hikaru mentioned Sarika Tanue, Lavia thought that Sarika's last name was quite unusual. Recalling that Sarika also had black hair, Lavia realized that Hikaru was the only other person she had ever seen with black hair. Lavia then came to the same conclusion that Hikaru was considering. Sarika was undoubtedly from another world, just like Hikaru. Hikaru had a feeling that Sarika was from another world. The name Sarika Tanue was a name from the world that Hikaru used to live in. Hikaru also noticed some similarities that he shared with Sarika, such as their black hair and eyes. What Hikaru found more ridiculous was that Sarika's soul board level was absurdly high, which was not normal. Hikaru thought about how it might have been a good idea to get in touch with Sarika if only she weren't a member of the 4 Eastern Stars. When Lavia asked if it was possible that Sarika didn't know about her incident, Hikaru responded that he did not want to take any unnecessary risks. Lavia was somewhat worried for Hikaru since Sarika seemed to share the same situation as him. However, Hikaru reassured Lavia that he would be just fine since he had her. After hearing the conversation between the 4 Eastern Stars and the village chief, Hikaru now had a clear idea of what they needed to do. The 4 Eastern Stars were taking a realistic approach by planning to wait until all the villagers had evacuated. The 4 Eastern Stars plan also helped Hikaru, whose only goal was to ensure Pauline and the others did not die. In order for Hikaru to finish his quest, he would have to stay in Manelka. Seeing Lavia's determined look, Hikaru shared that there was also another way for them to protect the village. Lavia was shocked when Hikaru told her that the other option was defeating the Dungeon Master. Hikaru then informed Lavia that the Dungeon Master was situated in the deepest part of the dungeon, which was crawling with monsters. Nervous, Lavia was about to ask Hikaru if he planned to do something dangerous, but Hikaru cut her off and told her that he would be charging in alone. Upon hearing Hikaru's plan, Lavia immediately protested, saying it was too dangerous. Hikaru then explained how the job was perfect for him, as someone who could get inside undetected and assassinate the target. Seeing Hikaru's point, Lavia still could not help but worry and agreed to the plan only if she could go with Hikaru. However, Hikaru did not want Lavia with him, since her attacks were wide-ranging and noticeable, which was not suited for subjugation. When Lavia realized that she could not persuade Hikaru, she asked him to promise that he would retreat if he sensed any uncertainty. After Hikaru responded that he would follow what Lavia asked of him, Lavia then hugged him, telling Hikaru that she would follow him if he did not come back. Hikaru then hugged Lavia, reassuring her that he would definitely come back. Sneaking into the village, Hikaru noticed some new faces and wondered if they were adventurers who had arrived from Pondo. Seeing Pauline about to open a door, Hikaru called out to her asking if they could talk for a moment. When Hikaru introduced Lavia, Pauline was surprised to learn that Hikaru's party member was a little girl. Hikaru then asked Pauline to provide some food for Lavia for a few days as he would be temporarily away. When Pauline agreed to Hikaru's request, she was shocked when Hikaru handed her a bag of money in exchange for the food she would provide. Lavia did not want to accept it at first, but eventually gave in when Hikaru pointed out that the money could be accepted as a donation for the church. When Hikaru asked Pauline to keep Lavia's presence a secret, Lavia added how she was scared of men because of her past, which was the reason she couldn't talk so well except with Hikaru. Not wanting to stress Lavia out, Pauline agreed to Hikaru's request. Everyone was then surprised when they heard that the scouts were back. Pauline then left the two and promised them that she would return. The information was then shared about how their enemies had gathered together and were now making their way to Manelka. When the scout mentioned that more than half of the monsters were small fry, the adventurers started joking around, believing that the mission would be easy. However, their cheery reaction immediately turned to worry after Sala shared that there were also lesser basilisks and woody bats, and that they had even spotted a Trent and a lost man. An adventurer with an eye patch stepped forward, boosting the other adventurers' morale by informing them that they could take care of the Trent and the lost man. When Solus mentioned how they planned to deal with the Trent and the lost man themselves, the man told Solus not to get riled up. He then made it clear to Solus that they did not care if she was a B rank or C rank, and announced that their party, the Wildhorn, would now take over the raid. Pia became enraged after witnessing the Wildhorn party defy Solus's orders. Solace then informed the others that they would also be joining the raid before ordering Pauline and the others to reassure the villagers. After seeing the 4 Eastern Stars off, Pauline called for Pia, telling her that it was time for them to go. When Pia suddenly mentioned how men were awful, Pauline responded that it couldn't be all men. Their small argument became heated when Pia kept pointing out how shady Hikaru was, while Pauline defended Hikaru's honor on his behalf. When Pia accused Hikaru of being part of the party that almost threw them to the goblins, Pauline snapped and was about to lash out at Pia when Priscilla asked them to stop. After calming the two down, Priscilla then suggested that they finish their tasks and patrol around the village afterward. When the 3 girls finally left, Lavia could no longer hold her anger after listening to Pia. Enraged, Lavia stated how she hated Pia for accusing Hikaru. Outside the village, the members of the Wild Horn were fighting off the monsters so easily. Observing from the top of a hill, Hikaru was impressed with the party's coordination and could see why the party was so bold. As Lavia wondered if the party could defeat all of the monsters, Hikaru then told her that the real problem was about to start, pointing to multiple men who were running away. After seeing the others flee, a man froze in fear as he now found himself in front of a Trent. Seeing his members fleeing, the man with the eye patch reminded the others to focus on just taking on the small fry. Observing the fight, Lavia wondered if the Wild Horn could defeat the Trent. Noticing that a magician was about to launch an attack, Hikaru realized that what they were about to do was wrong. When the Wild Horn's magician destroyed the Trent using Flame Lance, the others cheered. However, their celebration was short-lived as they immediately became confused when their view suddenly turned upside down. It was revealed that the Lost Man had caught them, grabbing them by their feet. As the Wild Horn party was about to be devoured, they were fortunately saved by Sala. Praising the Wild Horn for how cool they looked while fighting, Sala also pointed out that their approach would end in tragedy for them if they continued. Seeing the other members of the 4 Eastern Stars defeating the monsters and healing the injured, the Eye Patch Man told Sala that they hadn't done anything wrong. Sala then made the Eye Patch Man realize that their subjugation mission would only succeed if they adapted their methods. After seeing the Lost Man retreat, Sala guessed that the first wave had finally ended. Meanwhile, 2 men were out in the woods collecting spirit magic stones, unaware that they were being watched by a lost man. Suddenly, the Lost Man who had been watching the 2 men fell. It was revealed that the Lost Man was defeated by Hikaru. Picking up a rock, Hikaru mentioned how the number of enemies was increasing, which made him wonder if he should hurry on. Entering the dungeon, Hikaru was amazed at how bright it was inside the dungeon, even though it was already nighttime outside. With the walls being semi-transparent, Hikaru wondered if this was the reason why the dungeon was called the Forest of Deception, as the walls were messing with his perception. Hikaru heard a sound coming toward him, and saw that it was coming from a herd of lesser basilisks. Hikaru thought that it was a perfect opportunity for him to try out his projectile skill. Throwing the knife toward the lesser basilisks, Hikaru was able to hit the eye of one of the basilisks. Witnessing how the lesser basilisk fell to the ground, Hikaru wondered if he had hit the right spot, killing the basilisk with 1 shot. Wanting to try out another weapon, Hikaru guessed that it was not its turn yet. Back in Manelka, Pauline noticed that the other adventurers were getting riled up as another wave of monsters was about to head to the village. Pauline then asked Pia and Priscilla if they had also noticed how the time between monster appearances was getting shorter. Seeing Pauline's point, Pia was still not afraid as she felt reassured with the 4 Eastern Stars there to protect everyone. When Pauline mentioned that things would get much worse if the monsters continued to appear, Pia became annoyed and asked Pauline if she was trying to insinuate that Selous would lose to weak monsters. Pauline clarified for Pia that even if they had the 4 Eastern Stars with them, protecting the village without rest would soon make the B-rank adventurers hit their limit. Realizing Pauline's point, Pia agreed with Pauline that it was much better for them to evacuate the village. Seeing her father, Pia thought that the timing was perfect and immediately approached him, instructing him to gather the villagers and evacuate. The village chief could not believe what he had heard from his daughter's mouth and asked if what Pia told them about Selous and the 4 Eastern Stars was just a lie. The small conversation immediately became a heated argument that forced Pauline to get in between Pia and her father. The village chief pointed out how calling for more adventurers would be a wise choice since defeating monsters is an easy way of making money. Pauline agreed with the village chief, but their problem was that no other adventurers would be helping the village. The village chief understood that no one would be able to help protect the village, but they also couldn't abandon the fields that their grandparents had cultivated and protected. The stubborn village chief made it clear that they would always be tomato farmers and could be nothing else. Pauline could tell that everyone in the village understood the predicament they were in, but still decided to stay. Pauline also knew that if the villagers ran away now, they would end up running out of money and dying at a later time. When Pauline heard Pia's comment about her father bad-mouthing Selous, she glared at Pia, grabbed Pia by the wrist, and asked her how she could say such a thing toward her father. Pauline lashed out at Pia, crying in front of her as she could no longer recognize Pia, who had always watched her father from up close. Kneeling, Pauline mentioned how, as adventurers, they can't look away and must think about what they can do for the village. After Priscilla touched her hand, Pauline then came to her senses and apologized to Pia before running away to cool off. Inside the church, Pauline blamed herself since she was the one who asked Pia to persuade the village chief, and was also foolish to believe that the village chief would understand. Hearing a knock at her door, Pauline was then told that breakfast was ready in the dining room. When Pauline opened the door, she was surprised to see the priest. Pauline immediately turned away, covering her face. Before Pauline could go any further, the priest called out to her. The priest then initiated a heart-to-heart conversation with Pauline, in which he pointed out how he didn't mean to force the life he had on Pauline and guessed that he might have subconsciously told himself that Pauline could also be like him, a follower of God. Seeing how Pauline had grown, the priest asked her if she had met someone special. Pauline was surprised as she immediately thought of Hikaru. Comforting the sad Pauline, the priest then suggested that they eat now before their tomato soup got cold. Inside a tent, Sala was very happy to finally lay on a bed as she felt tired and sleepy. Sarika, who was beside Sala, was confused as to why Sala would get sleepy, knowing that Sala could go for 3 days and nights staying awake. Sala clarified with Sarika that she could only do that if she pushed herself. Sala then mentioned how surprised she was when the adventurers she entrusted with the east and south sides mentioned that there was no need to keep watch, since it was the opposite direction of the dungeon. Sala assumed that Sarika went to the eastern side to defeat some monsters after seeing a huge burn area on the ground. However, that was not the case, as Sarika told her that she did not go to the east side. Wondering who could make such huge burn marks, the two became alarmed and decided to go back and check the eastern side again. Checking the burn marks up close, Sarika confirmed that the cause was spirit magic. Based on Sarika's assessment from the marks alone, she shared her opinion that the marks looked like a beginner mage had cast the spell with all of their strength. However, the two were still unsure since there were multiple burn marks left on the ground. After pointing out some ash and determining it to be from a Trent, Sala wondered how powerful a mage could be to kill a Trent with fire magic alone. Sarika believed that only a D rank or above could defeat a Trent with fire magic. When Sala asked Sarika if she could also cast multiple spells, Sarika laughed and told Sala that she was asking a foolish question. After smacking Sala's hand away, Sarika then assumed that there was a spirit mage in the village, which reassured her that they would be fine. Sala, however, had doubts that the spirit mage they were talking about might not just be an ally, but Sarika was confident that the mage was an ally, since the spirit mage had defeated the monsters about to invade the village without anyone noticing. Sala agreed with Sarika's point, but still wondered why such a strong mage would continue to remain hidden. Observing Sala and Sarika from a distance, it was revealed that the spirit mage they were discussing was Lavia. At the eastern side, Lavia noticed that monsters and adventurers were fighting at the west and north sides, leaving the east and south sides open for an attack. Returning to the church and planning to rest, Lavia suddenly thought about and missed Hikaru. Lavia hoped that Hikaru would be fine on his quest, especially after receiving his promise that he would return. Inside the dungeon, Hikaru saw a staircase after defeating more monsters. When Hikaru finally arrived at the end of the staircase, he sensed something behind him and decided to remain still. Seeing the lesser wyvern up close, Hikaru was shocked by the sheer size of the monster. Although the monster had lesser in its name, Hikaru believed that such a creature shouldn't appear on the second level. All of a sudden, the lesser wyvern began wobbling and eventually fell over. With a wound on its leg, the lesser wyvern kept shaking until it died. Stepping on the lesser wyvern's neck, Hikaru felt that his rank had risen, which surprised him as he did not expect to gain experience inside the dungeon. Hikaru assumed that the soul rank increases by absorbing the souls of beings a person kills. With that thought, Hikaru believed that monsters created by the dungeon master wouldn't have souls strong enough to raise his rank. Picking up the loot from the lesser wyvern, Hikaru wondered if the shiny rock was a ruby. Although something about it bothered him, he decided not to dwell on it too much since there was no point. Out of nowhere, the whole dungeon suddenly shook. When things finally settled down, Hikaru felt relieved, but wondered if the disturbance was caused by a monster above C rank. Realizing that the monster responsible for shaking the entire dungeon was heading outside, Hikaru immediately thought of Lavia, who was at the village. Worried, Hikaru hastily began searching for the dungeon master before more monsters could reach the village. Back in the village of Manelka, the people were initially relaxed, but panic spread when the entire place started shaking. Everyone who was outside froze in terror as they saw something in the sky. Lavia, who had been resting, was woken up by the commotion and immediately went outside to check what was happening. Lavia froze in fear as she encountered a terrifying monster. Finding another staircase inside the dungeon that goes further down, Hikaru then questions the person who mentioned that the dungeon only has 5 levels. After killing every monster he encountered, Hikaru was able to gain 3 more points. As a precaution, Hikaru allocated the points to life concealment and magic concealment. As Hikaru walks down the stairs, he wonders if there are doors or treasure chests in the dungeon that could not be opened unless the puzzle is solved. Seeing a light source, Hikaru wondered if there was electricity on the 6th floor. When Hikaru looked up, he immediately recognized the ceiling as similar to the 1st floor. Knowing that the floor above was so pitch dark, Hikaru had no logical explanation for the light other than the dungeon having a mysterious mechanism. When Hikaru turned his attention in front of him, he was shocked to see a dragon. Wondering if the dragon was the dungeon master, Hikaru decided to check. However, upon stepping into the room, the dragon woke up, asking the identity of the being that had entered its domain. The dragon's voice was so powerful that Hikaru ended up flying away. What surprised Hikaru, other than hearing the dragon speak, was that it detected his presence, making him question whether his stealth had failed. After calming himself down, Hikaru assessed that the dragon could not see him. However, Hikaru was still puzzled as to how the dragon sensed his presence. Remembering his encounter with Lawrence, Hikaru wondered if it was also because of its instinct. Hikaru then noticed that the dragon seemed to have lost track of his location, which made Hikaru theorize that the dragon might be able to locate him only when he entered the room. Hikaru had many theories, but when he used magic detection on the ground, he was able to confirm one of his many theories. Multiple lines were marked all over the floor, and stepping onto one of them could reveal his location. Assuming that the dragon breathed fire, Hikaru was sure that he would definitely die if the dragon launched an attack. Hikaru was stuck as he was unsure if he had to max out life concealment or magic concealment in order to get close. Seeing the dragon look up, Hikaru's attention was also diverted upward, and he saw a huge hole. Meanwhile, at the village of Manelka, Solus immediately ordered everyone to get down as the dragon they were facing was about to attack them. With one roar from the dragon, most of the people became unconscious. After confirming that Sarika and Sala were fine, Solus was relieved that Sophie was inside the infirmary, as she believed that there were going to be lots of injured people. Solus then ordered everyone who was still conscious to split up and evacuate the residence. The leader of the Wildhorn asked Solus what she planned to do, but when he heard that Solus and the others would be buying them some time, the man could only show a look of disbelief before following Solus's order. Hearing the dragon being impressed by her for not running away from the roar, Solus did not expect the dragon to understand human speech. When the dragon mentioned how humans are nothing but murderers who worship the gods and slaughter other life forms, Solus then asked the dragon if it was a monster that came out of the dungeon. After the dragon confirmed that it came from the dungeon, it then introduced itself as the White Dragon, who was born from the wishes of its master, the brother of the Black Dragon who is known to be the strongest of dragons. The White Dragon then taunted Solus, but when Solus mentioned that her sword had drunk the blood of many dragons, the White Dragon did not believe her and thought that she was spouting nonsense. After Solus told Sarika and Sala to initiate Plan B, the three then split up. When Solus sensed the White Dragon's attack, everyone was surprised when they saw how Solus split the dragon's fire with her sword. Curious, the White Dragon asked Solus about the sword. Solus then told the White Dragon that she was speaking the truth when she mentioned that her sword had drunk the blood of many dragons, naming it White Rayblade. The other adventurers became curious about Solus's weapon, as it was their first time seeing it. Another adventurer then told the rest that the weapons Solus had been using were intended for small fries. In talking about the 4 Eastern Stars, Solus's weapon helped her earn the nickname Sun Maiden. The White Rayblade is a magic sword that can cut through anything when infused with magic. Breathing out, Solus was glad that slicing the dragon's attack somehow worked out. Solus knew that she could not win a head-on battle against the White Dragon, which made her decide to keep a distance in her fight against it. When the White Dragon learned that Solus was merely buying some time for the others, Solus was shocked. Although the White Dragon did not like that Solus could cut through its flames, it also knew better than to be stubborn. Instead of launching an attack on Solus, the White Dragon released its flames onto the buildings, causing other people to catch fire. Enraged, Solus asked the dragon why it had to hurt the innocent, pointing out the difference between a living being that kills in self-defense and one that kills for pleasure. The White Dragon called Solus a fool as it then told her that it was indeed a living being. However, it was also not alive. Since the White Dragon's purpose was to only kill humans, it then followed its only purpose when its master broke the dungeon's shackles. Witnessing the White Dragon burn down everything around it, Solus tried asking for it to stop. Seeing the destruction around her, Solus clenched her sword and thought that the only option left for her was close combat, drawing the White Dragon's attention solely to her. With a serious look, Solus planned to make the White Dragon realize that there are also humans capable of killing it. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 18. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.